action begins with the main character named Maximiliana Cross marrying a glorious knight named Riftan. The girl, who belongs to the aristocratic class, has always dreamed of this. In her romantic dreams, the girl always wanted a noble knight in shining armor to appear in her life and save her from a joyless life with an authoritarian father. But by the will of fate, the newlyweds had to part immediately after the wedding. Riftan had to urgently go on a long journey for important state affairs. 3 years passed. Circumstances changed. Now the king wants the main character's husband to divorce her and marry his daughter. Maximiliana Cross is in her room talking to her maid. Suddenly, her strict father enters the girl's chambers. He is very unhappy with what is happening with his daughter's marriage. The old nobleman wants to keep Riftan as his son-in-law because this knight has great influence in the kingdom. The main character's cruel father likes to wield his heavy cane so that everyone fears him. The same thing happened this time. The aristocrat hit the stone floor of the room with his cane and said that he had warned his daughter many times about the possible consequences of her inaction towards her husband. Maximiliana Cross is very upset that she has to listen to such hurtful words from her own father. But the unfortunate girl can do nothing about the situation. The old nobleman continued to scold his daughter. He said that during his 3 years of absence, Riftan had managed to transform from a simple knight into an authoritative commander who had crushed the Red Dragon Swordmaster sect. The main character listens attentively to her father. The aristocrat said that now his daughter's husband has enough authority and power to divorce her and marry the princess. All this is very depressing for the old nobleman, who is thirsty for power at any cost. The father of the main character had high hopes for her, but now perhaps all his dreams have collapsed overnight. Maximiliana Cross continues to listen to the hurtful words of her angry father. The girl began to grind her teeth out of resentment because she can do nothing in this situation. The unhappy girl tightly squeezed her green skirt, which is made of high-quality fabric. This helps her to contain her anger, resentment, and disappointment. But after a few minutes of her father's incessant psychological attack, the main character burst into tears and said that she had done everything for her husband, to keep him. But he left immediately after the wedding. So she had not seen him for 3 long years. At her with anger, Maximilian Cross and decided to teach her a lesson for this. The evil aristocrat said that he would not tolerate such insolence from his own daughter and swung his heavy cane at the girl, who was sobbing from grief and resentment. This was followed by a strong blow with a heavy and strong cane on the shoulder of the main character, who fell to her knees in pain and clenched her teeth tightly so as not to scream and not anger her cruel father even more. At him carefully. Maximilian Cross and said that the impudence of her words was driving him crazy. If she continued in the same spirit, she would receive an even greater punishment. The main character's father said that she should never divorce Riftan. He would not allow the entire kingdom to make fun of his family because of a stupid and imprudent daughter. After this, the cruel nobleman again began to shout at his unfortunate daughter and wave his heavy cane in front of her. The old duke calmed down a little after a few minutes and said that King Reuben could change his mind about marrying his daughter to Riftan if he himself did not want it. So, Maximiliana Cross must at any cost come up with a way to change her husband's mind so that he will forever lose the desire to divorce her. Meanwhile, a priest entered the young duchess's chambers and said that knights had arrived at the duke's castle. The father of the main character listened to his subordinate and headed towards the exit of his daughter's chambers. At the very door, the old duke told the girl that she would pay dearly if she did not find a way to change the decision of her husband, who had decided to divorce her. As the duke left Maximiliana Cross's chambers and disappeared into the corridor, the good priest bent over the unfortunate girl to heal her injured shoulder with magical spells. The cruel father of the main character walks down the corridor, striding with wide, confident strides. His heavy cane loudly knocks on the stone floor of the corridor. The old duke turns to the maid and says that he must meet with Riftan, who has just arrived at his castle accompanied by his comrades. After the kind priest had healed Maximiliana Cross's wound, she went to the window of her room and thoughtfully ran her hand over the transparent glass. The girl thought about the situation. The main character absent-mindedly looks out the window and thinks about what she should do in this situation. The girl understands that she will not be able to convince her husband, who wants to divorce her for the princess. Maximiliana Cross looked at her reflection in the window glass. She thought that she wanted to be as beautiful as her sister Rosetta Cross. Then the noble knight would never think of divorcing her. The main character began to cry quietly again and remember the day of her wedding. which happened 3 years ago. The guests who are present at the wedding loudly and joyfully congratulate the old duke, who tells everyone that he does not want to part with his beloved daughter. But his fatherly duty dictates so. This is hypocrisy, and nothing more. The main character stands at the altar in her wedding dress, waiting for her groom to appear. She thinks about how her boyfriend is using her to gain more power and wealth. Maximiliana Cross understood a lot today. The girl remembered how her cunning father, under the pretext of his illness, refused to participate in the battle with the dragon. This was an order from King Reuben, but the old duke refused to carry it out. In exchange, he gave his daughter, marrying her to the knight Riftan Calyps. At first, the noble knight refused the cunning Duke Cross and did not want to marry his daughter. But the father of the main character was able to convince Riftan Calyps to take Maximiliana Cross as his wife. When the wedding ceremony was completed and the celebration was over, a servant came to the main character and said that it was time for her to go to the bridal room to fulfill her marital duty. Maximiliana Cross was met in the corridor by her father, who noticed that she was very sad at the moment. The old duke said that his daughter was obliged to pull herself together now and look more cheerful to please her husband. The heroine's father looked at her carefully and added that she had always been a useless burden to him. If she did not fulfill her duty to her family well this time, she would be severely punished. The girl turned away from Duke Cross and did not know what to answer him. When Maximiliana Cross arrived in the bridal room, the maid changed her into a more appropriate outfit and brushed her hair. After that, the maid said that the girl must obey her husband in everything he ordered. The unfortunate girl was used to the beatings she had received from her father all her life. She asked the maid what she should do if her husband started beating her. The maid advised her charge to simply submit and endure everything. The main character said that she was very scared now. To these words of the girl, the maid replied that nothing could be done. It was necessary to please her husband. Otherwise, Duke Cross would be very angry. After some time, the door to the bridal chamber opened and the knight Riftan Calyps entered the room, who had come to fulfill his marital duty and spend the first wedding night with his young wife. The noble warrior confidently entered the bridal chambers and looked closely at his young wife, whom he hardly knew. The unfortunate girl stands opposite her husband, whom she also does not know. The girl trembles with fear. The young duchess is dressed in a light nightgown, which makes her shy in the presence of a man. Riftan Calyps went to his young wife and said that he knew that the girl did not like him because she did not know him at all. But the newlyweds must spend the night together tonight to strengthen their marriage. The noble knight came close to his wife and looked at her carefully. He said that he would not force the innocent girl to make love to him if she did not want it. Riftan Calyps could go to another room if his wife wanted it. The main character did not expect such a development of events. She looks intently at her noble husband and does not know what to answer to his honest words. Maximiliana Cross thought for a moment and remembered what her maid had told her recently. The girl must fulfill all her husband's wishes to please him, otherwise the old duke would be very angry. Therefore, the main character told her husband to stay with her today. Riftan Calyps listened carefully to his young wife's words, took off his clothes, and said that the moment had come for their marriage to be finally sealed. The main character is very afraid because she has never been with a man before. Maximiliana Cross is shaking with fear. She stares at her husband and does not understand why he took off his clothes. The girl knew nothing about intimate relations between a man and a woman until this night. The noble knight had never encountered such female inexperience. Riftan Calyps looked at the girl carefully and asked again if she wanted him to go into another room. The main character replied that her husband should stay with her tonight. After that, the knight approached his wife and tenderly kissed her shoulder. This caused conflicting feelings in Maximiliana Cross, but there was no turning back. The girl is lying on the bed. She is very afraid of what is about to happen because she knows nothing about it and has never done it before. But if the main character retreats and cannot please her husband, the old duke will simply kill her. The main character's first wedding night was over. It was a big surprise for her due to her inexperience. The next morning arrived. The weather was warm and sunny. Maximiliana Cross opened her eyes when she woke up. Sunlight flooded her face. The girl was not yet fully awake after a sleepless first wedding night. A few minutes later, the main character came to her senses. She sat up on her bed and looked around. Riftan Calyps was not next to her. She was alone in the room. The main character was overcome with great sadness. She lowered her head, in which obsessive thoughts were now swarming that her husband had left her for a reason. Perhaps he was dissatisfied with his young wife. But the young duchess knows that the noble knight had to leave urgently today to fight a terrible dragon. Maybe that's why he didn't have time to say goodbye to his wife. All this happened 3 years ago. Now the main character is standing by the window in her room and thinking about her husband who has returned. The girl does not know if he will want to be with her if she persistently courts him. Suddenly, Maximiliana Cross heard the heavy steps of a man who entered her room without knocking. The girl turned around to see who dared to disturb her peace. The main character saw a knight standing on the threshold of her room, dressed in heavy armor. The warrior does not dare to enter the girl's room and for some reason hesitates. Riftan Calyps stands before his wife in full knightly regalia. He looks at the young duchess and asks her if she is glad to see him back. Maximiliana Cross stares at her husband and can't believe her eyes. She hasn't seen him for 3 years. The girl doesn't know what to say to the noble knight. She is speechless for a moment from surprise. After some time, the main character came to her senses and collected her thoughts. She smiled sweetly at her husband and said that she was very glad that he had returned after a long absence. The noble knight looks closely at the young duchess and understands that she is now very embarrassed and is trying with all her might to hide it. The main character's mouth is once again filled with some incoherent nonsense. The words freeze on the girl's tongue, and she is too excited to coherently express her joy that her husband has finally returned to her after 3 years of absence. Maximiliana Cross stares at her husband and again doesn't know what to say to him. She doesn't understand what's really going on right now. This awkward situation tired the brave knight. Suddenly, he quickly approached his wife and hugged her tightly. But for some reason, Riftan Calyps looked very menacing. The noble knight looked his wife in the eye and said that he felt no joy on her part. The young duchess could have pretended to be glad to see her husband. After this, Riftan Calyps turned away from the main character. He is suffering moral torment. The knight said that he cannot understand why his young wife considers him some kind of terrible monster. Maximiliana Cross was very afraid that her husband would leave now and she would not be able to establish contact with him. The girl said that she did not consider the knight a bad person. The main character caught up with her husband, who was leaving her room, and grabbed him by the cloak as a sign that she wanted to correct the situation and detain Riftan Calyps not only in her chambers, but also in her life. The young duchess looks her husband intently in the eyes and asks him not to go anywhere and to stay with her at least for a little while. She misses him very much and will gladly spend this day with the noble knight, who has been absent from home for 3 years. Riftan Calyps turned and looked at his wife carefully. He cannot understand whether what the young duchess says is true, but the noble knight would like to believe it. The main character said that she is very worried now, so she does not know what to say in this situation, but she is very happy to see her husband. Therefore, the girl asks that the knight not be offended by her. Suddenly, Riftan Calyps turned and walked towards his wife. He hugged the main character again and looked into her eyes. After that, the noble knight told his wife not to move. A moment later, the lips of the spouses, who had not seen each other for 3 years, merged in a long kiss, which symbolizes their reunion after a long separation due to urgent circumstances. The sensual kiss of the husband and wife was interrupted after a few seconds. The young people simultaneously noticed that someone was spying on them and decided to find out who dared to do such an indecent thing. It turned out that the couple was being spied on by Riftan Calyps's subordinate. The main character's husband asked his fighter why he didn't knock on the door before entering. The warrior replied that he didn't want to disturb his commander. The knight was silent for a moment because he was embarrassed, and added that the gentleman's carriage was already waiting, because he had warned him that he did not want to stay here for long. These words greatly embarrassed Maximiliana Cross. The girl realized that her husband had come to visit her again for a short time. This was a very bad sign. Riftan Calyps had to be kept near him somehow. But the noble knight told his subordinate that the carriage would have to wait for now. He was going to stay a little longer visiting his wife. The main character calmed down a little and came to her senses. But still, something is bothering the girl. She cannot understand why her husband initially wanted to come to her only for a few minutes. This is a sign of disrespect and lack of love. Riftan Calyps thought for a moment and told his wife that he wanted to take her with him immediately. She must get ready at once and go with him in his carriage because he missed her very much. After this, the noble knight rose from the sofa where he wanted to lie with his wife and ordered Maximiliana Cross not to delay her departure for a second. The main character did not expect such a turn of events. The girl can't quite understand what's going on. She told her husband that she needs some time to pack for a trip to another place. Packing always takes a long time. Riftan Calips replied that he had no time for all this. Let Maximiliana Cross's maid pack her things for her and send them out with the accompanying carriage. For now, the young Duchess should only pack the most necessary things. The main character still does not believe that her husband is going to take her with him. The girl is very worried. She asked the noble knight why everything is happening so quickly. Riftan Calips looked at his wife carefully, listened to her, and asked if she wanted to stay in the house of her cruel father, or if she wanted to go on a journey with her lawful husband. The girl listened to her husband and humbly bowed her head before him. She said that, of course, she would go with the noble knight. But Maximiliana Cross wondered where she and her husband were going. Riftan Calips looked at his wife, took her hand, and led her out into the street. Several loaded carriages appeared before the couple, which were now heading to the noble knight's ancestral estate. The main character's husband showed her all this valuable property and said that now they would go together to Riftan Calips's native castle, where Maximiliana Cross was supposed to be from the day of their wedding. The girl looked closely at the property of her husband, who had been absent for 3 years, and realized that all of this was his military trophies, which he had won in bloody battles. The main character said that for her departure to the ancestral castle of Calips, she would need the permission of the old duke. The noble knight replied that his wife belonged only to him, and this was not up for discussion. A few minutes later, Maximiliana Cross is already driving through a dense forest with her husband in his luxurious carriage. The girl still can't believe what is happening now. The main character thinks that all this is just some kind of horror. Because you can't act so quickly and thoughtlessly. You should always think about the possible consequences that will definitely happen. The noble knight sits opposite his wife in his luxurious carriage. He looks out the window and watches the road. Riftan Cross also has something to think about at the moment. Maximiliana Cross immediately remembered her cruel father, who does not even know that she left his estate. The girl is very afraid of the wrath of the old duke when he learns about the events that took place. After that, the main character looked closely at her husband. She cannot understand why the noble knight decided to take her to his family estate. After all, he must divorce and marry the king's daughter. Will Riftan Calips really cancel his marriage to the noble Princess Agnes, who is famous for her beauty and powerful magical abilities throughout the kingdom? This simply cannot be, because King Reuben's offer is too generous for anyone to refuse. The main character knows that Princess Agnes, together with Riftan Calips, crushed the deadly red dragon, which had been attacking the kingdom for a long time and causing great damage to it. Maximiliana Cross looks closely at her husband and understands that any man would easily exchange such a pathetic girl as she for Princess Agnes. The main character continues to reflect on the current situation. She understands that Riftan Calips spent only one night with her, and they have not seen each other for 3 years. This is a weak argument in favor of the young Duchess. The girl looks at the noble knight and does not understand how, after 3 years of separation, such a gorgeous young man has not forgotten about her at all. It's some kind of miracle. Suddenly, the main character became embarrassed and her cheeks turned deep red. The girl remembered how Riftan Calips showed genuine interest in her today and kissed her. A few moments later, Maximiliana Cross looked out the carriage window to distract herself from her thoughts and saw something amazing. The girl had not left her family estate for a long time, and now she saw it in all its glory from the outside. It was a beautiful sight that took her breath away. The young Duchess watches her family castle through the carriage window and cannot tear herself away from this sight. The girl had not previously realized what a beautiful place she lived in, but after a few minutes, the main character became sad again. She understands that perhaps she left her home forever today and will never return here again. Maximiliana Cross is also afraid of offending her noble husband by not devoting enough time to him. Perhaps the knight is offended by his wife and does not want to talk to her now. After a few minutes of awkward silence, Riftan Calips broke the silence. He asked his wife if she was really that uncomfortable being around her legal husband. The main character looked at the noble knight and said that this was certainly not the case. She was very pleased to be in the company of her husband. Riftan Calips asked the young Duchess if she wanted to go back to her home. Perhaps he was hasty in taking her with him. Maximiliana Cross was very embarrassed when she heard this question from her husband and answered that she preferred to remain in the company of her legal husband and live on his family estate. The girl immediately remembered her cruel father and how badly he treated her. The young Duchess decided that she did not want to receive any more severe beatings from him with his strong cane, which she would never forget. Once again, Maximiliana Cross began to tug at her expensive and strong dress when she got too excited. This habit of the main character can be traced back to early childhood. The noble knight noticed his wife's excessive excitement and grabbed his head. He said that he knew almost nothing about his wife, but they would have to spend the rest of their lives together. Because of this, there might be difficulties at first. Riftan Calyps did not want his wife to be afraid of him and tremble with fear in his presence. The main character listened attentively to her interlocutor and could not believe her ears. Could it be that the noble knight had just confessed to her that he wanted to live with her for the rest of his life? Riftan Calyps replied that they were currently husband and wife to each other. Therefore, he wanted to live with Lady Cross for all the years that remained to him. All this seemed very logical, in the opinion of the noble knight. The main character completely agrees with her interlocutor. But for a moment, the girl thought that her husband thought that she did not share his views. The noble knight looked at his wife and said that he was very angry with her. This was because she had lived all 3 years of their separation in her father's estate and not in his native estate. The young Duchess had to move to the castle of Calyps immediately after the wedding. When the main character heard these words of her husband, she looked at him in surprise and replied that she would do it with pleasure. But the young Duchess did not know where her husband's estate was. Riftan Calyps replied to his wife that she was now deceiving him because he had sent his men several times to take the young Duchess to the ancestral estate of the noble knight. The main character replied that this was the first time she had heard of it. She had never known that her husband had sent his subordinates to take her to his estate. The spouses stare into each other's eyes. They try to figure out who is telling the truth and who is just lying. Suddenly, the noble knight's luxurious carriage stopped abruptly. Riftan Calyps looked out the window to understand what was happening and why his carriage had stopped. The noble knight's subordinate immediately galloped up to him with a report. He said that the guards had noticed orcs nearby. The main character's husband gave the order to form a living shield around the crew, which would protect them from the dangerous monsters. After this, Riftan Calyps got out of his luxurious carriage and strictly ordered his wife not to stick her head out of the carriage under any circumstances and to sit quietly in it. Maximiliana Cross listened carefully to her husband and said that she would follow all his instructions exactly. The girl is very scared and in a state of shock. A few minutes later, bloodthirsty and cruel orcs appeared near the knight's carriage, who immediately rushed into battle to kill all the knights and profit from the rich booty. The knights who accompany Riftan Calyps and his young wife have entered into a bloody battle with the orcs. They fight very bravely and skillfully. Suddenly, a huge green orc who was hiding in the dense thickets of the forest attacked the main character's husband. The noble knight managed to react to the attack of the bloodthirsty and cruel enemy in time. At this time, Maximiliana is in the carriage. She covered her ears with her hands so as not to hear the terrible sounds that are coming from outside. The girl is very scared of everything that is happening. Suddenly, a huge orc looked into the carriage window, deciding to find out what was in the luxurious carriage and what could be gained there. The main character saw a large fanged monster and almost lost consciousness. Maximiliana Cross's eyes widened in horror. The girl had never seen a real orc in her life. She knew that these monsters were merciless and cruel to their enemies. The main character decided to quickly get out of the carriage from the opposite side, so as not to catch the eye of the bloodthirsty orc. Otherwise, the monster could simply eat her. One of the knights noticed that the young Duchess had left the carriage and shouted for the girl to return to the shelter immediately. If she did not, something terrible could happen. The main character looked closely at the young knight who addressed her and said that she had not intended to leave the carriage, but it was being shaken by huge orcs. Therefore, it was very difficult to be inside the shelter. While the bloody battle was going on, the girl decided to crawl into the forest thickets to hide from the evil orcs who could eat her. Suddenly, the main character noticed a huge paw of a green giant above her, who was about to step on her and turn her into a pancake. For a moment, Maximiliana Cross thought that the last moment of her life had come. The young Duchess is overcome with fear and begins to pray, sensing her imminent death. The girl is very sorry that she will die so young. Suddenly, Maximiliana Cross realized that something strange had happened. She had survived, and the huge green monster had not crushed her with its foot even after a few seconds. The noble husband of the main character intervened in the situation, attacked the huge monster, and repelled its attack thanks to his courage and sharp blade. The young Duchess looked in surprise at her husband, who was bravely fighting a large orc. The girl had never seen a knight be such a skilled and courageous fighter. The main character fell on the soft forest grass and lost consciousness due to nervous tension. The girl lay there until her brave husband defeated the huge orc. When Maximiliana Cross lost consciousness, she was plunged into memories of her unhappy childhood. The old duke always told his daughter that she was a pathetic nobody and humiliated her in every possible way. The Duke of Cross looks at his little and helpless daughter. He convinces the girl that it would be better if she fell ill and died, like her unfortunate mother, because the young duchess is absolutely useless, according to her cruel father. The main character dared to wish that her father would give her at least a small piece of love. But in response, the girl received only cruel insults and severe beatings with a terrible cane. The young duchess burst into tears and thought that she should have been born as modest, beautiful, and obedient as her sister, whose name was Rosetta. Then Maximiliana Cross would have been loved and respected by everyone. But a little girl needs love to survive. She wants someone to love and for someone to love her back. Maximiliana Cross stretches out her arms to embrace the only living being in the world who loves her as much as she loves him. The young duchess hugged her huge black dog, Maxie, and asked if she would leave him too. The girl would not be able to survive the separation from her beloved pet. After some time, the main character's oblivion ended and she woke up, saying the name of her beloved dog Maxie out loud. The girl opened her eyes and realized that she was now in some unfamiliar room. The main character saw the face of her husband, who saved her from an evil and bloodthirsty orc who wanted to crush her with his foot in the forest. Apparently, Riftan is very worried about his wife's health. Maximiliana Cross sat up in her bed and asked her husband, who was looking after her, where they were at the moment. The girl had never visited this rather cozy place before. The noble knight listened to his wife and briefly answered her that they were now at the nearest inn, which was always distinguished by its comfort and hospitality. But the girl noticed that her husband was dissatisfied with something. Riftan touched his wife's forehead to check if she had a fever. The examination showed that the girl was fine. She had managed to escape with a slight fright. After that, the noble knight looked at his wife carefully and said that they were now in a small inn to gather strength and heal the wounds they received in battle. But they were behind schedule for their journey, so they would not have much time to rest. Riftan noticed that his wife was shaking slightly. He said that he was not a terrible orc and there was no need to fear him. For a moment, the noble knight somehow remembered that the girl, when she fainted, for some reason called him Maxie. This shocked all the knights who were present. Maybe the young duchess has a secret lover. The main character looked closely at her husband, who for some reason does not yell at her for leaving the carriage during the battle. On the contrary, the noble knight shows sincere concern for the girl. Riftan took a cup of water and offered it to Maximiliana Cross. He said that the girl had lost a lot of fluid and needed to be replenished all the time to recover faster. The main character took a bowl of fresh, cool water and thought about her cruel father, who would now treat her not with a healthy liquid, but with a blow of a hard cane to the ribs or shoulder. The noble knight looks at the girl carefully. He cannot understand why she does not drink the water. The young man said that there is no poison in the cup of water, and his wife can safely drink the healing liquid for her now. After that, Riftan added that the young duchess could tell him what was hurting her now. He would immediately bring a priest who would give pain relief and heal the injuries. The main character listened attentively to her husband and drank some fresh water from the cup he handed her. After that, the girl thought that calling the priest costs a lot of money. This means that the husband shows great care for his wife. Maximiliana Cross looked at her bed and only now noticed that she was wearing a nightgown with no underwear underneath. This surprised the girl very much. Had her husband really undressed her completely and put her to bed himself? The noble knight noticed his wife's embarrassment and smiled. The young nobleman asked the girl if everything was all right with her. The main character was very embarrassed and quickly wrapped herself in a sheet from head to toe. She said that she had just noticed that she was not wearing any underwear under her nightgown. This embarrassed the girl very much. The noble knight smiled again and said that a nightgown would be quite enough for his wife for now. After that, Riftan suggested that the girl get out of bed and have a little refreshment from the delicious dinner he had prepared for his wife. The young nobleman said that he had ordered the servants to wash Maximiliana Cross's clothes. They would be dry by tomorrow, and the servants would return them to the girl safe and sound. Riftan looked at his wife in surprise, who for some reason was embarrassed by him. He said that he had already seen her naked several times. For example, Yesterday, he had undressed her and washed her completely so that she would be fresh and clean. The main character was very surprised when she heard these words from the noble knight. She did not expect such a development of events and was very embarrassed again. Riftan Calip's added that he had to throw away his wife's underwear because the lacing on it was too tight. This led to the noble knight having to cut the laces and throw everything in the trash. The main character's husband thought for a moment and told her that they had been married for 3 years already, so the girl should not be embarrassed in front of him. Riftan Calips believes that he did a noble deed and took care of his wife by giving her his clothes to change into. The main character said that her husband misunderstood her. She will not be embarrassed in front of him anymore, but she needs some time to get used to it. Riftan Calips looked closely at his wife, who was still in bed, and said that he never liked overly tender and capricious girls. This brought the main character to her senses a little, who realized that her husband did not like excessive female whims. Maximiliana Cross fell silent, thought for a moment, and came to the conclusion that she was holding up her husband and his companions. It was her fault that they were all at this inn. Therefore, these people might hate the girl. After this, the noble knight told his wife that it was time for her to eat. He offered her hot soup for lunch, which he had prepared himself, and soft barley bread, which the local housewife had baked. Riftan Calips thought for a moment and said that tomorrow he would buy the young duchess new clothes and her strange underwear, which was always tight and did not allow the girl to breathe normally. The main character listened attentively to her husband and began to eat delicious hot soup. The girl thinks about her husband and cannot understand what he is really like. Sometimes the noble knight gets very angry at Maximilian Cross, but she can't understand why this is happening to him. Riftan Calips noticed that his wife ate too little of the soup he had prepared for her. The noble knight reprimanded the girl and told her to eat more. The main character said that she had already eaten her fill, and she was also not used to such coarse food. In the palace, she ate much better. Riftan Calips smiled and said that next time he would try to get the spoiled lady something more suitable for her delicate stomach. The young duchess had another bout of depression. The girl thought that she would forever remain a useless little duchess, whom everyone considered a stupid, ugly woman, who was not capable of anything in this life. After that, the main character looked closely at her husband and asked him why he took her with him on this dangerous journey. It would be better if everything remained in its place. This question angered the young knight. He looked at his wife and asked her why she suddenly decided to ask such stupid questions. The girl thought for a moment and replied that the noble knight had not wanted to marry her at first and had recently wanted to divorce her. But for some reason, he suddenly decided to take Maximiliana Cross to the family estate. It all seemed very strange. The main character started to get very nervous again and wrinkle her clothes. The noble knight noticed this and doesn't quite understand what to do in this situation. Riftan Calips does not understand why his young wife decided that he was going to divorce her. The noble knight demanded an explanation from the girl, but the main character doesn't know what to answer him. Riftan Calips thought for a moment and said with bitterness in his voice that he knows that his young wife got involved with another man, while the noble knight was fighting the enemies of the kingdom not for life, but for death. Maximiliana Cross replied that her husband was mistaken about her. She had always been faithful to Riftan Calips. The young knight replied that faithful wives did not talk about divorce. The girl said that she had been informed of her husband's desire to divorce her and marry the princess. The main character is very upset now. She cries and thinks about how she couldn't make peace with her husband. Besides, she only managed to anger Riftan Calips even more. The young knight, who had not seen his wife for 3 years, missed her very much. He looked at the upset girl and decided to console her as best he could, taking her in his arms and caressing her. The main character is not used to such rude and unusual treatment. The girl wants to resist her husband, but she can't. Maximiliana Cross's fortress fell in a few moments. Riftan Calips took his young wife in his arms and sat down on the bed with her. He decided to calm the girl with his caresses and tender kisses. The main character did not expect such a turn of events. The young aristocrat tenderly kissed his wife on the left eye. The girl was a little surprised, but she liked this treatment. Riftan Calips realized that he was moving in the right direction, so he began to kiss his wife's neck. Maximiliana Cross liked it very much, and she was able to relax a little in the strong embrace of her noble husband. When the main character came to her senses a little, the young knight said that he did not know what his wife had just said. He had long since rejected King Reuben's proposal and was not going to marry his daughter. Riftan Calips looked at his wife carefully and said that marriage was sacred to him. Therefore, if someone decided to divorce or cheat, he would punish them with his own hands. The main character thought for a moment and said that no man would want to give up a beautiful princess who possesses powerful magical powers and authority. The noble knight looked closely at his wife and asked if she had ever met Princess Agnes in person. After this, the young aristocrat added that he did not like and was not suited to life at the royal court. He preferred to live in a military camp or in his family estate. Riftan Calops thought for a moment and asked his wife whether she really wanted to divorce him or whether she had simply succumbed to the influence of rumors and idle gossip. The main character looked at her husband and shook her head. The girl doesn't know how else to prove to the noble knight that she wants to be only with him. At this point, the problem was resolved and the couple reconciled, having reached an understanding. The noble knight said that he would not be so kind next time if his wife spoke of divorce again. Suddenly, a strange spark of love ran between the spouses. They looked at each other meaningfully and realized that now was the right time for complete rapprochement. The main character looked at her husband carefully and realized that he missed her very much and wanted to spend the night together again. But the girl is not yet ready to get closer to her husband again. Maximiliana Cross turned to her husband and said that she did not want any intimate relations today because she was not ready for it yet. Everything was happening too fast. But Riftan Calops did not listen to his wife and kissed her tenderly again. He missed her very much for 3 years, so he wants to spend the night together tonight. The main character understands all this perfectly well, but she does not want it now. Therefore, the girl began to avoid intimacy with her husband. The young knight was very surprised by this circumstance. He did not expect such a development of events, so he is now in a slight state of shock. Besides, Riftan Calops is not used to being refused by girls. The nobleman thought for a moment and said that he would not insist on the fulfillment of his wishes. The young knight understands that marital duty must be fulfilled, but he does not want to force his wife. But the main character realized that she was making a big mistake. She decided to be an obedient wife and not to avoid fulfilling her marital duty, so as not to lose her husband again. This night passed differently than the one that had happened 3 years ago. Now, Maximiliana Cross liked everything, and she did not feel any pain at all. The young knight was also pleased with his wife. The next morning has arrived. The sun has already risen and filled the area with its bright light. The morning singing of birds can be heard everywhere. The main character sleeps with her husband in bed. This time, Riftan Calops stayed with his wife and did not leave her while she was sleeping. Maximiliana Cross quietly woke up and opened her eyes. The girl looks closely at her husband and now thinks only about him and what happened to her over the past 2 days. Tonight was special. The main character had never experienced anything like this before. The young duchess continues to look at the noble knight who managed to conquer her heart. Although initially she married for political reasons, the main character looked at Riftan Calops carefully and realized that he had a very handsome and cute face. He now looks very meek and submissive, unlike yesterday and tonight. Maximiliana Cross gently touched her sleeping husband's face and remembered what he had said last night. It turned out that the noble knight had really not wanted to leave and abandon his young wife 3 years ago. But an urgent order came from the king, and he had to go to a bloody war. The young knight felt his wife's touch and woke up from it. He opened his eyes and looked at the girl's gentle hands. The main character noticed that she had accidentally woken up her husband and wished him good morning. The girl regrets that she had disturbed the noble knight's sleep. Maybe he will be angry with her for this now, but Riftan Calops hugged his wife tightly and wished her good morning too. He said that he wanted to immediately repeat what they had been doing all night long. It was simply wonderful. The young knight had never experienced anything like it in his life. The main character did not expect such a development of events. She was very surprised that her husband had taken up his own business again and was not thinking at all about more important things that still had to be done today. The noble knight kissed his wife again and said that he had enjoyed the night so much that he could not restrain himself from repeating it in the very near future. Riftan Calops continued his attack on his wife, but she withstood the onslaught of the noble knight with dignity and said that now it was necessary to take care of more important matters. Suddenly, the assistant of the knight's squad leader knocked on the door and said that it would soon be noon and it was time for the squad to set out. But they could not do this without their commander. The main character's husband expressed his displeasure at being disturbed at an inopportune time. After that, the knight captain joked that he would execute his assistant that very day. After this, the noble knight looked at his wife and noticed that she had wrapped her head in the blanket again and was trembling with fear. This surprised the young nobleman very much. Riftan Calips grabbed his head and asked his precious wife what had happened to her, and why she had wrapped herself in a blanket again. Perhaps the girl was afraid of something or someone or was embarrassed. The main character listened carefully to her husband and said that she was afraid that his assistant had guessed what they had been doing there all night. These words again surprised the noble knight. In response, Riftan Calips laughed merrily. He could not believe that his young wife was such a pure and naive girl if she said such funny words. The young knight laughed again and thought that he had a wonderful wife who, in fact, did not yet know this world and people. The main character's husband looked at her carefully and said that she shouldn't act like a little child and be embarrassed. They are husband and wife, so they can perform their marital duty without being embarrassed by anyone. After this, the noble knight kissed his wife on the forehead and said that she had nothing to worry about. No one had the right to reproach her for anything. Maximiliana Crassus looks intently into her husband's eyes. The girl is very grateful to the young knight for explaining everything to her and supporting her in a difficult moment. Riftan Calips got dressed and told his assistant, who was outside the door, that he would soon leave the hotel room and take care of business. All knights should calm down and take care of their direct duties. The main character carefully watches her husband and admires his beauty, as well as his ability to command his subordinates. A few minutes later, a maid entered the hotel room. She greeted the young lady respectfully and said that she had brought her the clothes that her husband had prepared for her. The maid helped the main character put on a beautiful scarlet dress, in which the girl looked like a blossoming red rose. This magnificent outfit suited the main character very well. While putting on her new red dress, Maximiliana Cross encountered certain difficulties. For example, the girl complained to herself that such luxurious outfits are very difficult to put on by yourself and lace them up at the back. Meanwhile, the maid showed the main character that the head of the Royal Knights had also gotten her some excellent underwear. The girl liked it very much, but she told the maid that she would put it on herself. Suddenly, the noble commander of the Royal Knights returned to the room and asked if his wife was ready to leave for the family estate. Riftan Calips liked his wife in her new outfit very much when he saw her, but the girl replied that not everything was ready yet, so the young nobleman would have to wait a little longer. The main character's husband was not at a loss in the current situation and said that he would now help her finish changing into the new dress that he had given her today. The noble knight approached his wife from behind and began tying the laces on her red dress. The girl thanked her husband for his help. He replied that he had bought the very first dress he had found that day. The knight would find a more suitable outfit for his wife in his family estate. The main character listened carefully to her husband and thought that he had just joked. The noble commander of the Royal Knights had just given her a very expensive and beautiful dress. Maximiliana Cross did not wear such dresses at home. When the main character lived in her father's estate, she always had to sew outfits from the remains of fabric that was bought for her sister Rosetta. This was very humiliating for the young duchess, but she had to endure it without complaint. A few minutes later, the couple headed out of their hotel room to continue their journey to the ancestral estate of the heroine's noble husband. The knight promised the girl that she would have the best outfits that she could change daily. When the couple went outside, it was already well past noon. The royal knights joyfully greeted their commander and his beautiful wife. The main character really liked this honor. The assistant commander of the royal knights turned to Riftan Calips and said that they were supposed to set out at dawn, but due to the captain's fault, they had to delay for several hours. Time was running out, so they had to hurry. Riftan Calips listened attentively to his assistant and looked him straight in the eyes. After that, the captain of the Royal Knights told his subordinate that he should immediately shut up and watch his tongue carefully in the future. Otherwise, he would be severely punished for his lack of restraint in speech. When the noble couple settled into their carriage, the heroine's husband told her not to pay attention to the stupid soldiers who didn't know what they were talking about. They didn't like the young duchess's father, but now she had her husband's name, so she had nothing to worry about. Maximiliana Cross listened attentively to her noble husband and fully agreed with his words. The knights disliked her father because it was his fault that they had to go on a 3-year campaign, from which they were now returning. Meanwhile, the captain of the Royal Knights thought about his stupid and too straightforward subordinates. They had hinted to their commander today in the presence of his wife that he should pay more attention to his subordinates and not to the old duke's daughter. The main character looked at her husband carefully and noticed that this situation made him very angry. The girl understands that perhaps the captain of the Royal Knights will want to punish them for the excessive liberties they allowed themselves today. Looking at her noble and strong husband, Maximiliana Cross smiled and felt completely safe for the first time in her life. The girl understands that this happened because of the presence of the captain of the Royal Knights. Riftan Calyps turned his attention away from his stupid subordinates and looked at his young wife. This noble knight wants the girl who is now next to him to be always safe. The noble knight looked his wife in the eyes and said that today she smiled at him for the first time. The main character blushed with embarrassment when she heard her husband's words. For the first time in her life, Maximiliana Cross feels like a truly happy person who is safe next to her loved one. This is a wonderful feeling that the girl really likes. A few minutes later, the carriage set off and the couple set off again. During the next stop, which was made so that the travelers could rest a little, the main character heard some noise in the street. The head of the Royal Knights got out of the carriage to find out what was going on. He asked his assistant what was going on. The knight replied that there was a dispute with a local merchant who had overcharged for his goods. Riftan Calyps listened carefully to his assistant and told him not to make too much noise out of nothing, because it was still a long way to the captain's ancestral estate. Excessive publicity could only do harm. The assistant commander reluctantly agreed with him. The young knight listened to his commander and said that he was right. But money should also be saved, and one should not let any dishonest traders deceive oneself. The captain of the Royal Knights listened attentively to his subordinate and said that he urgently needed to find a suitable hut for Lady Cross, and let the young knight spare no expense in doing so. The main character looks at her husband attentively and is glad that he continues to take care of her. But Maximiliana Cross, who can now rightfully be called Lady Calyps, is not happy that she will have to spend the night alone without her husband. The girl approached her master and told him that she wanted to spend the night only with him. The noble captain of the Royal Knights was very happy about this. In this rundown settlement, the knights were able to get an old barn as a common overnight shelter, which was full of dirt and spiders. But it was impossible to find anything better now. The main character did not expect that she would have to spend the night in the company of other knights and insects. Riftan Calyps called his wife when she entered the barn and showed her a cozy corner he had prepared for her. Here the girl would be relatively comfortable during the night. The main character approached her husband and thanked him for continuing to take care of her. After that, the girl began to watch the preparations of the captain of the Royal Knights. Lady Cross looked around carefully. She really hoped that in such a wretched place there were no bedbugs or huge rats that could attack even a person when he was sleeping. The captain of the Royal Knights looked at his wife carefully and hastened to reassure her. He said that there was a lot of dirt and dust here, as well as enough cobwebs, but there were definitely no huge rats in this place. The noble knight finished preparing dinner and invited his wife to the table. Today's dinner will be juicy baked potatoes. The main character thanked the captain of the Royal Knights and began to eat the baked potato. The girl really liked this delicious dish, despite its simplicity. Maximiliana Cross and Riftan Calyps are sitting on a pile of hay in an old barn, eating baked potatoes, sitting by the fire, and they now feel that everything is fine with them. Happiness fills the hearts of the spouses. The captain of the Royal Knights took another potato, which he baked on the fire, and offered it to his young wife. The girl needs to eat well. She will need her strength on the road. The main character initially wanted to refuse in favor of her husband, but he insisted on his offer. Lady Cross greedily ate another large baked potato because today she was very hungry. A few minutes later, all the knights and noble spouses lay down to sleep nearby because there were no other places suitable for this. The modest girl became very excited when her husband hugged her in the presence of his subordinates. The noble knight said that he hugged her so that she would not freeze tonight. Suddenly, the main character saw a strange stranger enter the barn with a lantern in his hand. He noticed that the girl was shy and said that she should be more vigilant. The captain of the Royal Knights told his wife that she should not be afraid of this man. He was a wizard who accompanied their company. Riftan Calyps asked the wizard named Ruth to mind his own business. A battle of glances between the men began, which ended in a draw. The sorcerer replied that he had no intention of interfering in other people's affairs. He only wanted to help the young lady a little. After this, the young wizard extended his hand to the main character and offered her to take the magic stone of fire, which would help the girl warm up tonight, which promises to be cool. The main character listened attentively to the young wizard and was very surprised when he offered her such an unusual gift. The sorcerer said that knights can sleep even in the snow, but the fragile and tender aristocrat needs magical support. Wizard Ruth handed Lady Cross a magical artifact and said that it would help her stay warm tonight and avoid catching a cold. The girl thanked the caring wizard. The main character was very happy that now she would not have to freeze in the dirty barn in which she found herself by the will of fate that night. After that, the noble lady gave the wizard a very sweet smile. The sorcerer looked closely at the wife of the noble captain of the royal knights and was a little embarrassed when she smiled sweetly at him. He told the girl to call him simply Ruth. That was how they met. Riftan Calyps watches everything closely and hugs his wife. The captain of the royal knights began to feel a little jealous of his wife towards the young sorcerer. Therefore, he ordered him to leave immediately. Night slowly but surely comes into its own. The knights lie on the hard floor of a dirty barn and sleep peacefully. For seasoned warriors, such sleeping conditions are nothing special. They have already seen a lot in their lifetime. The main character holds the magic artifact near her chest and feels its pleasant warmth. The girl likes it very much. The captain of the royal knights tenderly hugs his wife and also warms himself with the help of the magic stone. For a few more minutes, Lady Cross thought that she would not be able to sleep in the old and cold barn. But now she was quite warm thanks to the magical artifact and almost fell asleep, forgetting about worries. The next day, the travelers set out again after spending the night in an old and dirty barn. Today, the road leads through a dense forest. The main character looks out the carriage window and admires the trees and flowers, of which there are many everywhere. The girl thought that she had almost gotten used to the nomadic way of life after several days of constant travel to her husband's ancestral castle. Lady Crassus noticed her husband riding past the carriage on his horse. The girl thought that Riftan Calyps was avoiding her for some reason today. In the morning, the captain of the royal knights put his wife in the carriage and said that today he would continue the journey on horseback, because there were too many things in the carriage and not enough free space. Now, this circumstance worries the main character very much, and she again has another attack of depression and anxiety. The noble captain of the royal knights noticed that his wife was looking at him, and for some reason she now looked very sad. Riftan Calyps called out loudly to his subordinates and said that it was necessary to make an urgent halt, because the people and horses needed rest and a nutritious meal. When the carriage stopped, the captain of the king's knights helped his wife out of the tall carriage and down to the ground. There was a dissatisfied whisper among the knights that the progress was again being delayed by the young lady. Descending a small ramp, the main character felt that her legs were very numb. After that, she fell into the arms of her husband, who prudently caught her. The noble captain of the royal knights holds his beloved wife tightly in his strong arms. The main character is very grateful to him for this. A few moments later, Riftan Calyps sat Lady Cross down on the soft grass and began to stretch her numb legs. The girl said she was fine and there was no point in stopping the entire procession. The young nobleman listened attentively to his wife and said that he would decide for himself what would be best for everyone in the current situation, especially for his wife. Meanwhile, he continued to massage the girl's tender feet. The main character said that now everything is really all right with her. The girl's husband stopped massaging her feet and thought for a second about why his wife was constantly putting herself down and not wanting to take what she was entitled to. After this, the young nobleman turned to his wife and said that she should treat herself with more respect. The weakness and fragility of his wife did not irritate Riftan Calyps at all. It was an honor for him to court the lady of his heart. Lady Cross confessed to her husband that she was afraid that he was avoiding her today. After that, the knight did not explain anything to his wife. He took her hand and led her somewhere deep into the forest thickets. This frightened the girl a little. A few minutes later, the captain of the royal knights stopped and pressed his young wife against a tree. He looked at Lady Cross with love and said that he avoided her for only one reason. If Riftan Calyps was near his wife, he immediately wanted to indulge in lovemaking with her. That's how much he loved her. The main character did not expect such a development of events. She is in shock from the words she just heard from her husband. The girl thought that her husband avoided her company because she irritated him, but it turned out that the young knight finds it difficult to restrain his love near her. Therefore, it is better not to provoke him. Riftan Calyps looked at his young wife and said that lately he had begun to feel something strange. He had begun to become too attached to Lady Cross. This could be too dangerous for a warrior who lets his guard down. His enemies could take advantage of it. Now, the main character understands everything and is no longer offended by her husband for the fact that he began to devote less time to her. The noble captain of the royal knights said that they would soon reach the watchtower, where they could have a good rest. The assistant commander called him and said that everything was ready to continue the journey. Riftan Calyps ordered everyone to set out again. After some time, the travelers reached the outpost. The captain of the royal knights noticed that the weather had started to deteriorate. Therefore, they needed to take a shortcut to get to their destination before the storm began. The noble knight rode up to the carriage and told his wife that if she did not resist, she would have to ride a little with her husband on his horse to outrun the approaching storm. The main character was a little surprised by her husband's unusual proposal, but immediately agreed to ride a horse with him in order to get to their destination faster. A few minutes later, the girl settled comfortably on the horse's back next to her husband. The captain of the Royal Knights embraced his wife and ordered all his companions to continue on their way. Lady Cross looked around and thought that one had to be extremely careful when galloping a horse, so as not to injure oneself or fall off. The assistant captain of the Royal Knights told his commander that he hated the coming rainy season, which would most likely begin today. If the travelers had not wasted time on all sorts of nonsense related to the captain's wife, they would have arrived in the city of Anatol exactly on time. The main character heard the unpleasant words of her husband's assistant and thought that she was a burden to the knightly detachment, which was busy with important military affairs. Riftan Calyps replied to his subordinate that the weather conditions were rapidly changing for the worse, so all travelers needed to hurry to get to the city of Anatol on time. The assistant of the captain of the Royal Knights said that the storm could delay the travelers in the city of Anatol. This could anger King Reuben, who is expecting Riftan Calyps in his castle in a few days. The husband of the main character answered his assistant, whose name is Uslin Ricardo, to talk less and watch his tongue more. Lady Cross listens attentively to the conversation between her husband and his deputy. The girl understands that her presence in the knightly company creates additional problems for her husband. She does not want to do this. Suddenly, a scout appeared and informed the captain of the Royal Knights that he had spotted 5 terrible werewolves ahead. Riftan Calyps listened carefully to the report of his scout and ordered a detachment of knights to deal with the bloodthirsty werewolves that were blocking the path of travelers at any cost. The main character was very scared when her husband's subordinates rushed at the terrible werewolves to destroy them. Riftan Calyps hastened to calm his wife and told her to close her eyes and ears. Then she would not see or hear anything that could traumatize her delicate psyche. Suddenly, the captain of the Royal Knights was attacked by a bloodthirsty werewolf who was hiding in the forest thickets. But Riftan Calyps quickly solved the problem with the monster attacking him with one precise blow of his sword. Lady Cross watches her husband wield his blade with great attention, marveling at his swordsmanship. It frightens her a little, but also greatly delights her. After this, the young Duchess looked at the defeated werewolf, and she began to have an unexpected attack of nausea from the fear she experienced at the sight of this terrible beast. One of the subordinates of the captain of the Royal Knights said that werewolves are acknowledged masters of disguise. They always attack their prey unexpectedly and insidiously. But this time it did not help them. Riftan Calyps told his wife to hold on tight, because now they would quickly ride their horse away from the places where the bloodthirsty werewolves lived. At the command of the captain of the Royal Knights, the entire detachment galloped forward to quickly leave the domain of the predators, of which there could still be many here. After a while of fast horse riding, the main character noticed that the day was already approaching its end. The beautiful sunset enchants the girl with its magical glow. After some time of prolonged riding, the captain of the Royal Knights suddenly ordered all travelers to stop. The main character took a breath and looked around. A moment later, her gaze was captivated by the magnificent sight that opened up before her. The sight took Lady Cross's breath away. She had never seen such mesmerizing beauty in her life. And it was no surprise because the girl had spent her entire life locked up in her estate. The main character saw a beautiful castle, which seemed to hang between the sheer walls of mighty rocks. This city generously pours its bright light on the sun setting behind the high mountains. Down in the valley, there is a beautiful village of peaceful farmers who love to work the land and are always proud of their success in animal husbandry. It is clear that this city is prosperous and flourishing. It was not by chance that Riftan Calyps ordered all his companions to stop their horses. He wants everyone to be able to enjoy the beautiful view of their hometown and welcome it into their souls. The captain of the Royal Knights looks at his possessions with admiration. He loves his hometown Anatol very much and is ready to sacrifice a lot for its well-being. Riftan Calyps told his wife that they had finally arrived at his family estate. The main character looks at the beautiful city and thinks that she definitely likes being here. The nobleman said that the city of Anatol was home to many hired workers and miners who extracted minerals from the nearby mountains. The peasants lived in the valley and were mainly engaged in livestock farming because the soil in the mountainous area was poor. The main character listened attentively to her husband and said that this castle seemed very beautiful to her. It was even better than her family estate. Everything here was so big and majestic. This delighted the girl. Riftan Calip said that the city of Anatol has large fortress walls. This is necessary to effectively defend against the numerous monsters that live in the area. Lady Cross was very scared when she heard her husband's words about the monsters that were very numerous here, but the noble knight hastened to calm the girl down. Riftan Calip told his impressionable wife that the city walls of Anatol would withstand any attack. He spent a huge amount of time and resources to fortify his family estate and make it impregnable to any enemies. The girl listened carefully to her husband and said that she would not worry now. But something in the soul of the main character tells her that in these places it is necessary to be extremely careful. Lady Cross's fears were confirmed by the words of the wizard Root, who said that the walls of this stronghold are very strong, but everything depends on those who will defend it in difficult times. And this may cause problems. The captain of the Royal Knights ordered his subordinate to shut up immediately. Otherwise, he would live not in a strong castle, but in the neighboring forest. After that, Riftan Calip ordered everyone to set out and head for the city of Anatol. In a few minutes, the whole procession was already at the city gates. A little more, and the travelers would already be inside the impregnable fortress. A vigilant guard noticed Lord Calip's approaching and ordered his comrades to open the mighty city gates, which then began to open with a loud creak. When the castle gates opened, the captain of the Royal Knights and his companions headed into the courtyard of the estate to complete their long and difficult journey. The main character noticed that the residents of the city of Anatol loved and respected her husband very much. They loudly and joyfully greeted the knight who saved the continent from a terrible dragon. The girl remembered how the inhabitants of her native estate treated her father. They were always afraid of him and only bowed their heads before him. Here, everything is different. The townspeople rejoice at the sight of their master. Uslan Ricardo turned to his commander and said that the locals had prepared a welcoming feast for the city's guardian. They wanted to honor the slayer of the dragon and honor the fallen heroes. Riftan Calip said that he needed to urgently go to his family estate, and his subordinates could stay in the village and enjoy the prepared feast. After this, the captain of the Royal Knights told his wife to hold on tightly to the horse. Now they would quickly ride to the family estate. A few minutes later, Riftan Calip and his wife rode up to the gates of the family estate. The efficient and vigilant guards quickly opened the gates and greeted their commander. The main character carefully examines the architecture of her husband's ancestral castle and enjoys this magnificent sight, which cannot be compared with the estate of the Duke of Cross. The travelers dismounted and decided to head to their quarters to rest, wash, and have a tasty meal after the long journey. It was a difficult journey, but it ended successfully. In the hall of the family estate, Riftan Calip was met by the manager. He joyfully greeted his master and said that everything was ready for the hosts to rest. After this, the estate manager turned his attention to Lady Cross and asked his master who this beautiful girl was. The captain of the King's Knights introduced his young wife to the steward of the estate and said that he had been delayed on the road because he had called to pick up his wife at her castle. This undertaking took some time. The main character greeted the estate manager and said that her name was now Maximiliana Calypse. The girl was a little embarrassed, but quickly came to her senses. The noble knight turned to his wife and said that they could now put off the pleasantries. It would be better to go to the master's quarters and indulge in rest. When Lady Calip entered the huge hall, she was very surprised. The girl had never seen such a large room before. The main character also noticed that there was no butler here, and a gloomy atmosphere reigned everywhere. The girl realized that this environment was very different from the one she lived in before. The captain of the King's Knights also noticed this. He looked gloomily at his steward and asked why he had not taken care of the improvement of his dwelling while the master was away. The manager was very afraid of his master's anger and said that Riftan Calip had sent a huge sum of money, which the servant did not know what to do with. He thought that this money should simply be saved until the master's arrival. Being in such a gloomy atmosphere, the main character felt the approach of a panic attack, which was about to happen to her soon. A little more and the girl would feel bad. Lady Calip doesn't know what to do in this situation. She is confused and does the first thing that comes to her mind. The main character grabbed her husband by the cloak. The commander of the Royal Knights immediately felt the anxious touch of his wife and turned his attention to her. He asked the girl what had happened to her. The main character answered her husband that she could not breathe in this gloomy room, and she wanted to rest right now to recover from a long and difficult journey. The captain of the Royal Knights listened carefully to his wife and said that he would now take her to another room where she could rest a little. Riftan Calip opened a door nearby, and the couple found themselves in bright and comfortable chambers, which were perfect for relaxation and light entertainment. The main character's husband noticed that the manager and the maids had prepared this room better. Lady Calypso also calmed down a little and said that she liked it here better. The commander of the Royal Knights asked his wife how she felt in this room. The girl replied that she felt much better. Riftan Calypso said that he would punish his servants for not preparing his chambers well enough for the master's visit. The noble knight was very upset that his servants and manager were so stupid and slow. Now Lady Calypso will think that she will have to live not in the family estate, but in a dirty and gloomy barn. But the main character does not agree with her husband. Lady Calypso hastened to calm her husband and said that it was her fault. She should have come to the castle of the captain of the Royal Knights 3 years ago and arranged everything here as befits a true aristocrat. Riftan Calypso listened carefully to his wife and turned to the window. He believes that there is some truth in this, but does not want to blame his lady for anything. The main character began to get nervous again, because for a moment she felt useless even for her beloved husband, who was ready to do anything for her. The commander of the Dragon Knights did not lose his head in the current situation. He approached his wife and said that from this day on she would be busy with the arrangement of the family estate so as not to be bored. Lady Calypso did not have to worry about money at all. All her expenses would be covered immediately. The young duchess calmed down a little. She listened attentively to her husband and said that she liked his wonderful idea very much. The noble knight was very glad that he had been able to calm his lady and also pleased her. Riftan Calypso leaned towards his wife and tenderly kissed her hand. The main character looks closely at her husband and understands that she is very lucky with him. She does not understand why she used to think differently. What a pity that the noble knight does not know her well. Riftan Calypso gently took his wife by the chin and looked deeply into her eyes. He promised the girl that he would do everything to make her happy in this estate, because now this castle was their common home. Lady Calypso really likes what she hears from her husband and master. The girl only now realized that now she has her own home, in which she will be happy. The captain of the Dragon Knights looks at his wife and realizes that he has hit the nail on the head. He has been able to guess Lady Calypso's true desires, and now she feels great and no longer panics. The main character thought for a moment and told her husband that she needed to take a bath now for complete happiness. Riftan Calypso replied that he would immediately order the maids to bring hot water, which would be enough for water procedures. The captain of the Royal Dragon Knights headed out of the room to fulfill his wife's request. Lady Calypso looks after her husband and thinks that she does not deserve such happiness. A few minutes later, the maids came to prepare a hot bath for the mistress. Lady Calypso sits on the bed and thinks that she has never done any landscaping before and does not know how to spend money wisely. The girl is afraid of disappointing her husband. The main character understands that now she has a great responsibility on her shoulders. She must make every effort to complete the task and improve her estate. Suddenly, the captain of the King's Knights entered the room. He took off his clothes and said that he wanted to wash himself and his wife. Riftan Calypso smiled mysteriously and looked intently at his lady. The girl immediately understood that her husband was thirsting for her passionate love again. The efficient maids had already prepared everything so that the spouses could take a bath together and receive unforgettable pleasure from it. Lady Calypso did not argue with her husband and decided to bathe with him at the same time. The captain of the Dragon Knights told his wife that all married people do this. For the main character, such a bath is very unusual. She thinks that she is used to always taking a bath completely alone. But bathing with her husband is an incomprehensible novelty for the girl. The couple plunged into the hot water. Lady Calypso feels a little constrained. She does not know what to do in this situation. Riftan Calypso decided to stroke his wife's cheek. He did so, but he felt that the girl found this gesture unpleasant. This puzzled the young nobleman a little. The commander of the Royal Knights looked at his wife carefully and asked the girl what she was thinking about so much. Maybe she should leave all important thoughts and just enjoy taking a hot bath. The main character answered her husband that she likes everything now, but she is simply afraid to disappoint her beloved man again. The girl has no more reasons to be sad. After this, the young nobleman hugged his wife and said that he would now help her wash and rub her back. The girl submitted to her husband's will, but said that she could handle it herself. Riftan Calypso hugged his wife even tighter and kissed her neck. The girl was puzzled by her husband's actions. She wanted to wash herself and relax after a long and difficult journey, not to hug. The captain of the Royal Knights was already prepared to attack his wife to satisfy his desire. But it all ended before it even began. The main character relaxed in the warm water and safe environment. This led to the girl falling asleep in her husband's arms. Riftan Calypso was very surprised when he saw his wife sleeping on his chest. The noble knight was a little disappointed that he did not get what he wanted. But it was no big deal. The couple would have enough time for that. The next morning has arrived. The sun is shining in the sky and cheerful birds are flying. The city of Anatol has already woken up and is living according to its usual routine. Lady Calyps also woke up. She opened one eye to understand where she was and what was happening around her. The girl was so tired during the long and dangerous journey to the city of Anatoli that now everything was mixed up in her memory. She needed some time to regain her strength and come to her senses. The main character realized that she was lying in her new room on a large, luxurious bed. The last thing the girl remembers is how she fell asleep in the bath, which she took with her husband. Lady Calyps looked around and suddenly discovered that there was a maid in her room, who immediately wished her mistress good morning and said that her name was Riftan. The maid said that from that day on she would serve the young mistress and carry out all her orders. The maid also added that Riftan Calyps had left early for the training camp to prepare his knights. The main character got out of bed and went to the dressing mirror. The efficient maid deftly braided her mistress's hair. Lady Calyps felt that the maid Riftan was very careful and gentle with her hair and combed it with extreme care. After styling her hair, the maid helped her young mistress put on a new yellow dress. It fit the main character. Lady Calyps felt much better in her new yellow outfit. The last memories of the past left the girl. She also forgot about the difficult journey that she had recently had to endure with her beloved husband. After that, the main character asked her maid where the training camp was. Lady Calyps noticed that the maid Riftan began to look at her strangely. Suddenly, the girl realized that without noticing it, she began to stutter from excitement. The main character felt very ashamed. She felt like a real disgrace to her new family. So the girl quickly ran out of her room to find her husband. The young duchess quickly walks down the corridor of her family estate, which she now has to look after. The girl reproaches herself for her carelessness and thinks that she must not stutter anymore. Otherwise, everyone will laugh at her. Meanwhile, the main character began to nervously crumple her skirt again. This is a sure sign that she is having another panic attack. Suddenly, the main character stopped and thought that she needed to pull herself together. If she wanted to start a new life in this house, she needed to start doing it immediately. Suddenly, the girl heard someone calling her loudly. She turned around to see who was trying to catch up with her. The main character realized that her personal maid Riftan had been chasing her all this time. Finally, the maid caught up with her mistress and said that she would be happy to take her to the training camp. Lady Calyps calmed down a bit and agreed to go to the camp accompanied by Riftan. It would be even better for the main character. The girl thinks about how in her past life, all the servants mocked her daily because of her stuttering and panic attacks. This should not happen again here. Therefore, Lady Calyps will make every effort to do so. The main character also realizes that she is now in a new house, which is strikingly different from the Cross family estate. Perhaps the inhabitants here respect each other more. Lady Calyps met the steward of the estate. He respectfully wished his young mistress good morning and asked her if she had slept well that night. The main character thanked her interlocutor and told him that she had a great rest and sleep. There is a simply wonderful bed in her room. The manager of the estate expressed his joy at this and asked the lady's forgiveness for not having had the opportunity to introduce himself properly yesterday. He said that his name was Rodrigo Sarich. In this house, this man was in charge of all the affairs and servants. Lady Calyps listened attentively to her interlocutor and said that she was very pleased to meet him. Rodrigo Sarich added that from this day on, everyone in this house would faithfully and loyally serve the young lady, as they had served her husband before. The main character's voice trembled from excitement, and she began to stutter again. The girl told the manager that yesterday the captain of the Royal Knights promised to hand over the reins of the estate to her, because she must improve everything here. Rodrigo Sarich listened attentively to his mistress and said that this morning he had already received the appropriate instructions from Riftan Calyps. He planned to call the best merchants to help his mistress in her endeavors to improve the Anatol estate. The main character was very happy when she heard the manager's words. The girl breathed a sigh of relief and thought that wonderful people lived in this house, to whom she didn't need to prove anything. Rodrigo Sarich suggested that his mistress inspect the Anatol family estate with him to draw up a plan for its reorganization and renovation. The main character happily agreed to this proposal. Lady Calyps went on a tour of the castle with the manager. He told the girl that this estate was founded 150 years ago by Sir Anatol, who was a glorious knight of the Empire of Rome. But one day the state fell, and now it is inhabited by many different monsters that few people hunt. 10 years ago, King Reuben appointed the knight Riftan Calips as lord of the Anatol estate in order to return it to the protectorate of the state of Whedon. The manager pointed out to his mistress the fact that after his appointment, the young lord had thoroughly rebuilt and strengthened his ancestral castle in order to protect himself and his subjects from bloodthirsty monsters. Rodrigo Sarek thought for a moment and said that thanks to the strong walls of Anatol Castle, its population had almost doubled in the last few years. The main character listened attentively to her interlocutor and noticed that he was very proud of this information. This means that Rodrigo Sarek loves his master and his city. The girl also thought that her husband was respected by everyone here. Therefore, the inhabitants of Anatol's city would treat their new mistress with respect. Otherwise, the commander of the Dragon Knights would take care of it. The main character quietly laughed from the realization of this simple fact, but she felt very pleased and happy at heart. It is always good when you have a strong patron behind you. Rodrigo Sarek turned to his mistress and suggested that she go to the next room, which would certainly attract the attention of Lady Calips. The girl agreed to follow her guide. A few moments later, the travelers found themselves in a huge room, which made an indelible impression on the main character with its neglect and devastation. The manager noted that this huge banquet hall was intended for official receptions and pleasure balls, but no celebrations had ever been held here. Lady Calips looked at all this sad desolation and told Rodrigo Sarek to call the traders as soon as possible. It was urgent to start improving the castle of Anatol. A little later, the manager showed his mistress a huge oak tree on which there was not a single leaf. This majestic tree had dried up without proper care and now only takes up extra space in the middle of the yard. The main character looks closely at the dried branches of the once luxurious tree and understands that she has a huge job ahead of her to improve her new family estate. The manager said that there was once a greenhouse here. Rodrigo Sarek added that the Anatol Castle lacks servants, and there is no gardener to take care of the trees and flowers. Meanwhile, the travelers have reached the training camp. A training session is currently taking place here. Riftan Calips is practicing combat techniques with his knights. Under the watchful eye of the Dragon Knights leader, new recruits and seasoned warriors are practicing their fighting skills. During a recent journey, the warriors began to relax and lose their knightly spirit. Today, the task is to return everything to its former place. Suddenly, the steward became agitated and said that the travelers had better return to the castle. The young master does not like extra people present during training. This will cause great anger in Riftan Calips. The main character listened carefully to her guide and agreed with his opinion. The commander of the Royal Knights should not be disturbed when he trains his subordinates, so as not to fall under his hot hand. Lady Calips was about to leave the training camp to continue her tour of Anatol's ancestral castle. But suddenly she felt someone grab her hand tightly and not allow her to continue her way back to the castle. The main character turned around to see who dared to grab her hand and stop her. It turned out that Riftan Calips had noticed his wife a long time ago and secretly crept up to her to surprise her. He asked the girl why she was leaving without greeting him. The young duchess was a little confused and told her husband that she had been inspecting the Chateau Anatol with the manager. She did not want to disturb her husband and distract him from his training. At the same time, the girl cannot understand how her master managed to get to her so quickly and do it completely unnoticed. It is simply incomprehensible. Does the commander of the Royal Knights really possess such inhuman speed and strength? Riftan Calips looked closely at his beautiful wife, who looked very good in her new yellow dress. After that, the commander of the Royal Knights said that Lady Calips could not be superfluous here by definition. She could only inspire her husband to new exploits and heroic deeds. After these words, Riftan Calips gave orders to his subordinates that they had a whole hour of rest. They could not only rest, but also have a good breakfast, because today would be a hard training day. Rodrigo Sarek received instructions from the young master to attend to other matters of the estate. After this, the commander of the Royal Knights took his wife by the hand and said that he himself would show her everything in their common home. Lady Calips walks next to her husband, and for some reason she feels a little awkward. She is afraid to ask unnecessary questions to her master, because they can offend him or upset him in some way. Suddenly, the main character remembered the previous evening and taking a bath with her husband. The girl realized that yesterday she had ruined a romantic moment and offended her master. She does not understand how she could have just gone and fallen asleep in the bath yesterday. It was just awful. The commander of the Royal Knights looked closely at his wife and noticed that she was very confused about something at the moment. Riftan Calips asked the girl if everything was okay with her now. This question confused the young duchess even more. The main character listened carefully to her husband and said that she apologized for ruining their romantic evening yesterday. The girl did not want to do this. Riftan Calip smiled and replied that his wife had nothing to apologize for. She had been very tired yesterday, so she had fallen asleep in his arms in the bathroom. The main character looks closely at her husband. The girl understands that he turned out to be a very understanding and responsive young man, despite his menacing appearance. The captain of the Royal Knights decided to take his wife to the fortress wall and tell her how the castle guards and sentries work. Lady Callips listened attentively to her master's story and drew attention to the fact that the fortress walls in this city were very strongly fortified. If they were properly defended by sufficient forces, they would forever remain impregnable. After that, the main character noticed a tall tower in the distance and pointed it out to her husband. The girl asked the chief of the Royal Knights what kind of structure it was and what it was for. Riftan Calip said that the wizard Ruth lives and works in that high tower. This structure is closest to the mountains, so it helps strengthen his defensive and offensive magic during the enemy attack on Anatol Castle. The captain of the Royal Knights thought for a moment and added that the girl should not approach this magical tower under any circumstances. The sorcerer, Ruth, had placed a large number of magical traps around the citadel for safety purposes. This could be dangerous for uninvited guests. The girl did not expect that the wizard Ruth had such great magical powers. She asked what kind of magic he had the best. The head of the Royal Knights looked at his wife carefully and said that she was asking too many questions about the wizard route. This was classified information for the safety of the city. The main character was a little confused because she did not expect such a reaction from her noble husband. But nevertheless, she said that she would not ask any more questions on this topic. Riftan Calips was also a little confused. He did not want to upset his wife with rude behavior. The noble knight asked the girl if she was bored in his company. The main character answered that she felt great next to her husband. Lady Callips looked at her gorgeous husband and remembered how all the ladies of the court had looked at him at Cross Castle. It was impossible to get bored with such a gorgeous man. Suddenly, the main character had another panic attack. The girl remembered that her husband was getting a lot of attention from women. This was very bad. He could be taken away by more agile ladies. Riftan Callips asked his wife what had happened to her again and why she had started to shiver and wrinkle her dress again. The girl replied that the wind had simply become too cool. The chief of the Royal Knights embraced his wife and held her tenderly. He said that the girl should have dressed warmer today so as not to catch a cold. The main character answered that she was fine now. The sun was warm enough. It was just that sometimes a cool wind blew and made the girl shiver. It wasn't scary. After this, the chief of the Royal Knights noticed his wife's new dress and asked if she liked it. The main character listened carefully to her patron and replied that she really liked the yellow dress he gave her. It was the best outfit she had ever worn. Riftan Callips looked at his wife and said that he was very happy about this circumstance. Soon he would invite a professional dressmaker to Anatol's castle, who would sew hundreds of similar outfits for the young duchess. The main character really liked her husband's words, but she decided to tease him a little and asked why he gives her everything she wants and never refuses anything. The girl is not sure whether the courageous chief of the Royal Knights should act like that. The noble gentleman listened attentively to his wife and was very surprised by her words. He quickly collected his thoughts and replied that he always keeps his word and takes care of those close to him. Suddenly, a strong wind blew and the main character turned around to see where this fresh stream of cool air came from, which brought with it a few green leaves. Lady Callips saw her husband's handsome face again, shining with joy in the morning sun. The girl thought that she was incredibly lucky to marry such a gorgeous man. Riftan Callips smiled at his wife and extended his hand to lead her to the castle. The main character took her husband's hand and realized that she had finally found her home, where she would feel very good. The captain of the Royal Knights took his wife to her quarters and was forced to urgently return to the training ground to his subordinates. The girl was left alone in her room, and she became a little bored. The main character remembered today's tour of her husband's family estate. She really enjoyed this walk. Besides, Riftan Callips said that there would be a big feast tonight. So Lady Callips wouldn't be bored anymore today. Suddenly, a maid entered the young duchess's chambers and addressed her mistress. The girl was a little confused because she was too immersed in her thoughts and dreams. The maid brought her mistress a cup of hot ginger tea so that the girl could warm up after walking along the fortress walls. There is always a cool wind blowing there. The main character thanked her maid and enjoyed the aromatic drink, which came in very handy now. The young duchess's personal maid, Riftan, bowed respectfully and said that she had made a mistake this morning and had unintentionally offended her mistress. She humbly asked for forgiveness for that. The main character listened carefully to her personal maid and said that she did not hold a grudge against her at all. The girl was disposed towards Riftan from the first minute and only wanted the best for her, and also completely relied on her. The maid's heart finally melted and she cried with joy. Finally, the maid would be able to spend time and serve a beautiful lady from high society, and not the rude knights of Anatol's castle. Riftan, in a fit of joy, grabbed her mistress's hands and said that now she could sincerely serve her and fulfill all her wishes. The main character liked such great dedication of her personal servant. After this, the maid suggested that her mistress change for the upcoming evening feast. The young duchess did not expect such a turn of events. She thought that for now she would only have one new dress. Riftan said that today is a very important day. The young lady must impress all the knights who will be present at the feast with her irresistible beauty. The personal maid will be happy to help her mistress with this. It's evening. The main character in a new golden outfit is walking along the corridor of her new house. Suddenly, she meets the manager, Rodrigo Sarich. The servant greeted his mistress respectfully and told her that she looked wonderful today. Her new outfit suited her very well, but the main character doesn't like something about her new look. She looks at her reflection in the window glass and realizes that she made a mistake somewhere. The girl's old fears and self-doubt have come to the fore. She feels that she is not worthy of such magnificent clothes and jewelry. All this is a consequence of long humiliations in the Cross Castle. The main character is also afraid to think about where in this alienated castle, where there are no noble ladies, luxurious outfits and jewelry came from. All this is very strange and causes vague guesses and suspicions in the young duchess. The girl thought for a split second that perhaps the knights here already had another mistress, who was her husband's mistress. The thought made the main character's mouth go dry. A few minutes later, Rodrigo Sarich and his young mistress came to a massive door, behind which the sounds of the evening feast that had already begun could be heard. Now the young duchess must cross not only the threshold of this room, but also her fears. Before entering this hall, the main character closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and completely concentrated on the current moment, so as not to get confused and embarrassed in front of her husband's knights. With a final effort, Lady Calyps entered the banquet hall, which was filled with drunken men celebrating their return home after a 3-year absence. Riftan Calyps saw his wife and immediately called her to him. The commander of the Royal Knights loudly addressed his wife and invited her to take her place at this celebration, which was largely dedicated to her person. When the other Dragon Knights noticed their mistress's presence, they immediately fell silent and began to watch their beautiful mistress with respect and admiration. The young duchess is simply irresistible in her new appearance tonight. The main character took her place next to her husband. After that, the commander of the Royal Dragon Knights introduced Lady Calyps to all his subordinates. Now the young duchess is the official mistress of this house. Riftan Calyps looked closely at everyone present in this hall and expressed the hope that everyone would treat the new mistress with respect and serve her in every possible way. The main character feels uncomfortable among such a large number of people. She is not used to such feasts, so the girl can have a panic attack again at any moment. The captain of the Royal Knights noticed that something was wrong with his wife. He asked the girl what was wrong. Maybe she didn't like the treat. The main character replied that the table was set beautifully. She just felt a little uneasy. Lady Calyps added that she would try to eat something right away so as not to upset her master. The girl tried the roast, but noticed that her husband was watching her too closely. The commander of the Royal Knights does not want his wife to starve because of empty worries. He took a fork and put a full plate of meat on his wife's plate. This horrified the girl. She would never be able to eat so much. Riftan Calyps said that his wife should eat well. He does not understand those women who spend their entire lives on exhausting diets. The main character does not want to upset her master and said that she will definitely eat a few more pieces of juicy meat that he put on her plate. The chief of the Royal Knights was quite pleased with this. He said that the young duchess should eat well every day because she looked somewhat exhausted. Suddenly, one of the feasting knights asked his commander if it was true that he was able to stop the dragon's fiery breath with his blade. The main character heard the question of the young knight to her husband and froze in surprise. Was her master really so strong that he was capable of such a heroic feat? The captain of the Royal Knights modestly stated that he had done nothing special. It was true. He had been able to stop the dragon's fiery breath with his sword, but only because the blade was made of a special material. After these words, all the knights present decided to simultaneously drink to their commander and to his mastery of the art of fencing. One of the knights said that the captain's sword had special properties. It could absorb magic from the environment and then use it for its own purposes. Riftan's assistant, Calypsa, added that a powerful mage would be in trouble if he met the captain on his way. The more powerful the wizard's magic, the stronger the commander's blade would become. After this, the subordinate of the captain of the Royal Knights added that his commander stands on the same level as the famous sacred warrior Leon Quahail, who also possesses enormous power. Riftan Calyps pays no attention to the drunken talk of the heated knights. He calmly feeds his wife and makes sure that she does not go hungry. Wizard Ruth turned to his commander and said that he was too modest today. Not everyone can defeat the fire dragon, and the captain should be proud of this achievement. The main character carefully watches this friendly company and cannot believe that people can so easily find a common language without envy and anger. Lady Calyps remembered the suffocating feasts in her father's house and felt instantly terribly sick. She would never attend such disgusting festivities again. The girl looked closely at how wonderfully these knights were resting, and thought that now she would rest only like this and no other way. In this room, everyone feels lively and cheerful. Each guest enjoys the joyful atmosphere and gets a great boost of energy from communicating with others. Suddenly, the main character noticed that her husband was thinking about something and mechanically playing with the necklace that was on her neck. The girl intuitively understands that her husband has now remembered the woman who wore this jewel before her, but he does not want to show it. The main character decided to find out some details about this mysterious woman from Riftan Calyps. The young duchess is very interested in who she is and where she went, but the girl doesn't know whether it's worth asking her husband about it now. She doesn't want to upset her loved one and make him angry with her for a long time. Finally, Lady Calyps made up her mind and asked her husband what had happened to him and why he had suddenly become so sad and distant from her. Perhaps the girl had somehow offended her master, or had somehow failed to please him due to her ignorance. Riftan Calyps ignored his wife's question. He continued to sit thoughtfully in his place and fidget with the necklace on the girl's neck. Suddenly, the commander of the Royal Knights grabbed his wife by the waist and abruptly lifted her from her place. The girl realized that they were about to go somewhere. The main character is a little confused. She is afraid that she has really angered the gentleman with her stupid questions, and now he will punish her for it right now. The young duchess began to panic again. The girl does not understand what exactly upset her husband. She wants to fix everything, but it is too late for that. Perhaps now the commander of the Royal Knights will want to divorce his wife. The captain of the Dragon Knights suddenly stood up from the table and loudly declared that his wife had drunk too much today and was now drunk. Therefore, he was urgently retiring with her to the marital chambers. These words greatly surprised all the guests at the dinner party. Riftan Calyps added that the guests should not worry. Everything would be fine. They could continue to feast without their master. It would be better for everyone. After that, the captain took his wife by the hand and they headed towards the exit of the banquet hall. The main character felt very ashamed and awkward at that moment. The girl now feels guilty about everything. The assistant captain of the Royal Knights told his companions that the commander was going to have a fun night tonight, so they should not lag behind him either. They should get drunk tonight and fall asleep right at their tables. All the knights supported this wonderful idea. Riftan Calyps heard his officer's words and looked at him with a withering gaze. The captain's assistant realized that he needed to watch his tongue more, especially if the commander was nearby. But the captain of the Royal Knights, thanks to the presence of his beautiful wife, changed his anger to mercy and said that he attributed the excessive talkativeness of his subordinates to the effects of intoxication. After that, Riftan Calyps cynically added that if his knights could still breathe until tomorrow, he would try to fix it during the upcoming training. All the knights listened attentively to their commander and realized that he was not joking now. When the couple left the banquet hall and went out into the corridor, the young nobleman passionately pounced on his wife and kissed her passionately. He had been waiting for this moment all day to touch his beloved woman without excessive restraint. The main character did not expect such a development of events. She thought that the gentleman was angry with her for some reason and was going to punish her. But it turned out completely differently. This discouraged the girl. Such emotional swings are unlikely to have a positive effect on her emotional state tonight. Riftan Calyps confessed to his wife that he could not bear to watch the other knights admire the beauty of the young duchess. This enrages him. But then all the men who are now in Anatol's castle will have to be executed. The captain of the royal knights kissed his wife passionately again and put all his love for the young aristocrat into this kiss. Emotions overwhelm the spouses. They are very close to making love right here. So much passion filled their young and hot hearts. Suddenly, the main character felt that the spouses should stop now. Otherwise, it will end in something bad. You can't indulge in passion in public places. This should be a shame for all self-respecting people. Riftan Calyps listened carefully to his wife, but his passion was too strong now. He hugged the main character tightly and said that he could not stop. For a moment, the young duchess felt something was wrong. It seemed to the girl that the commander of the royal knights was trying to replace another woman with her. But this was just a guess, and nothing more. The passionate aristocrat did not think long about the situation. He picked up his wife in his arms and was about to carry her to the marital chambers. The young man realized that only there he could be alone with his wife, and no one would disturb him. A few minutes later, the couple found themselves in their bed. The main character said that she needed to take a bath. But the captain of the royal knights only laughed in response and said that he would wash her himself even better than she could do it herself. The young aristocrat began to passionately kiss his wife's neck again, but the main character felt a little uneasy about it. The girl realized that she was starting to have a panic attack. In such exciting moments, for some reason, negative memories of her cruel father and joyless life in the Cross estate begin to emerge in Lady Calyps's memory. The young duchess is in the arms of her husband. But for some reason, she felt scared today. Maybe she was scared by the excessive pressure of the captain of the royal knights. Morning has come. The spouses are sleeping quietly in their luxurious bed after a stormy night of love. Lady Calyps has not been able to cope with her fears and panic attacks. This is very alarming for the main character. Riftan Calyps woke up and started kissing his wife's hair. He told the girl that her locks smelled wonderful. They were also very soft and silky. But the main character is so traumatized by her father and lacks self-confidence that she feels like her husband is just making fun of her or likes ugly girls. A few minutes later, the captain of the royal knights got out of bed and said that he had a lot of important things to do today. He recommended that his wife lie in bed all day because it was raining outside. Riftan Calyps added that after today's stormy night, his wife would definitely benefit from a good, restful sleep, which perfectly restores her strength. After that, the heroine's husband quickly got dressed and headed towards the exit of the marital chambers. Finally, the captain of the royal knights turned around and looked mysteriously at his wife. Then he said goodbye to Lady Calyps and left the room. When Riftan Calyps left the room, the young duchess looked out the window and noticed that it was raining heavily outside. A few minutes later, the main character's maid, Rudis Ein, entered the chambers. She began styling her young mistress's hair. Lady Calyps asked her maid not to braid her hair today, but to leave it loose. This hairstyle pleases the captain of the royal knights very much. After that, the main character drank a cup of aromatic tea, which was brought to her by a faithful and efficient maid. Lady Calyps does not know how to entertain herself today because it is raining outside. The girl thought for a while and decided to go to the local library. When the young duchess came to the library, she was amazed by the huge number of different books that were there. At Cross Castle, the library was much smaller. The main character called the estate manager and asked him to bring the account books. The girl decided to start improving her new home that very day. Rodrigo Seric quickly found and brought his mistress the books she had asked for. After that, the manager wished his mistress luck in her endeavors. He hoped that the girl would be able to improve the Anatol estate. Lady Calyps spent the day in the library reading the books to learn how to manage her household properly. The captain of the King's Knights returned home in the evening and found his wife asleep in their bed. He did not wake her and went to bed too. The next day, the main character continued to do the household chores of her estate. She decided to meet with a merchant to buy everything she needed. Lady Calyps has summoned the merchant and is now expecting his visit any minute. The girl is very nervous before this meeting because she is afraid of making some mistake. The main character believes that servants always deceive stupid masters, so the girl decided to show the merchant her greatness. She must show herself as the real mistress of this house. Suddenly, Lady Calyps's personal maid reported to her that a representative of the merchant guild had arrived. The protagonist told the maid to let the merchant in. The young duchess greeted the guest when he entered her room and invited him to have a cup of tea. The merchant guild representative also greeted the girl and accepted the young lady's offer. He said that his name was Adaron Sauner. The merchant regretted that he had not been able to meet Lady Calyps earlier. The merchant also added that he had heard about the young lady's intentions to take up the improvement of Anatol's estate. This was commendable, and he was ready to provide the girl with all possible assistance in this endeavor. The main character thanked her interlocutor and said that she wanted to start renovating her house from the windows. The representative of the trade guild listened attentively to the young lady and said that he could deliver any goods from any corner of the world to her castle. The girl liked it very much. She realized that she would be dealing with a real professional. Aderon Sonner took a pencil and paper out of his bag to make a list of all the things his interlocutor might need in the near future. After the main character listed all her wishes, the merchant left to bring the girl some sample goods tomorrow. Lady Caliph spent the entire day in household chores. The girl was very tired. She had not even realized before how difficult it is to effectively manage a household. The next morning came. The representative of the trade guild brought samples of various goods to show to the customer. The main character carefully examined all of this and chose what she liked. During the conversation with the merchant, the manager of the estate, Rodrigo Siric, entered Lady Calypso's chambers and said that professional tailors had arrived, who had recently been called by the captain of the Royal Knights. At the same time, the old servant looked sternly at the merchant, fearing that he might deceive the young duchess. The main character listened attentively to the manager and was a little confused. The girl urgently needs to finish business with the merchant in order to devote time to professional tailors. This is also very important. The experienced merchant immediately noticed the young lady's embarrassment. He smiled sweetly and said that he could come another day and the girl would then complete her order. The main character supported this proposal. When the Merchant Guild representative left, Lady Calypso's personal maid noticed that her mistress was very tired after the merchant's visit. She suggested that the girl rest a little, or postpone the tailor's visit. But the main character said that she was fine and could continue working. A few minutes later, the tailors entered the young duchess's chambers, respectfully greeted the young lady, and introduced themselves as Roan and Linda Saris. The main character replied that she was very pleased to meet the fashion designers famous throughout the kingdom. These words greatly flattered the guests. The professional said that Riftan Calypso ordered them to sew top-quality dresses for his wife. The price of these dresses does not matter. After these words, the tailors immediately began fitting work. The main character obeys the designers in everything and thinks about whether all this is worth such a huge amount of money. The girl also understands that lately she has been experiencing a strange feeling, as if sleep and reality have completely mixed up. And now the young duchess cannot distinguish reality from illusion. The sad thoughts of the main character were interrupted by Linda Saris, who asked the lady if she liked the high hat. The girl answered that she would like to wear something lower. The dressmaker replied that she would change the style of the headdress. When the fittings were over and the dressmakers had gone home, Lady Calypso felt completely exhausted and empty. The girl had almost no strength left. In this dejected state, the main character looked at the old and cracked floor of the corridor she was walking along. This finally finished the girl off. Everything in this estate needs to be updated. But Lady Calypso doesn't know if she has enough strength for this. The young duchess also worries about whether she can spend such huge sums of money to fulfill all her desires without a twinge of conscience. Perhaps Riftan Calypso will scold his wife for her excessive spending of the family budget. The main character is in a very difficult situation. She does not know how to count money and does not understand anything about it. But the girl also cannot ask her manager for help because he may consider her stupid. Lady Calypso is at a dead end. Suddenly, Riftan Calypso appeared in the corridor. The commander of the Royal Knights was very surprised that his wife was alone in the cold corridor. She might catch a cold if she stayed here for a long time. The young nobleman looked at his wife carefully and told her not to walk in the cold corridor in such light clothes. Next time, Lady Calypso should dress warmer so that she would not have health problems. The main character listened attentively to the captain of the Royal Knights and accidentally noticed that a small blue bouquet of flowers was peeking out from under his cloak. The young duchess asked her husband what kind of flowers he carried under his cloak in rainy weather. The young knight quickly hid the bouquet and told his wife that there was nothing there and that she had imagined it. After that, the commander of the Royal Knights said that they both should go to the chambers to dry off and warm up. The main character followed her husband. The girl thinks about whether she should ask her husband for help in matters of housekeeping. Suddenly, Riftan Calypso stopped and nevertheless pulled out a small but beautiful blue bouquet of flowers from under his cloak. This greatly surprised the young duchess. The commander of the Royal Knights was a little embarrassed. but quickly pulled himself together and said that he had picked these beautiful flowers in the meadow. He liked them very much, so he decided to bring them to his wife. The main character is very happy about such an unexpected sign of attention from her precious husband. She does not know what to say from excitement. But Riftan Calyps, for some reason, thinks that his gift seems pathetic and useless to the girl. Lady Calyps accepted the bouquet from her master with great pleasure. She considers it the best sign of attention in all the time that they have known each other. The captain of the Royal Knights fears that his gift is too modest for his wife. He says that the girl can throw away this useless and stunted broom if she wants to do so. Lady Calyps listened attentively to her master. After that, she tightly clutched the blue bouquet in her hands and said that she was not going to throw it away under any circumstances. The main character admires her gift. The girl understands perfectly well that Riftan Calyps picked this bouquet of flowers in a meadow in the pouring rain. This indicates that the captain of the Royal Knights loves his wife very much. The young Duchess looks intently at the blue wildflowers and thanks her husband with all her heart for such a wonderful gift that has lifted her bad mood today. The girl felt very warm in her heart. She immersed her face in the blue bouquet and inhaled the wonderful scent of wildflowers with her whole chest. After this, the main character burst into tears from tenderness and emotion. Lady Calypso thanked her husband again for such wonderful moral support. The commander of the Royal Knights looks at his wife carefully and is somewhat confused. The young aristocrat did not expect that his wife would react to his modest gift in this way. Riftan Calyps thought for a moment and said that it was time for the couple to go to their room to warm up, dry off, and wash up. It wouldn't hurt to have dinner either. The main character can't stop admiring the bouquet of flowers her husband gave her. This gift inspired the girl very much. She feels like she's in a dream. The next morning, Lady Calyps woke up to find that it was a beautiful day outside, with no more gray clouds in the sky, but only a bright sun shining. The young Duchess looks out the window happily and thinks that such wonderful weather has not been seen in the city of Anatol for a long time. This means that the captain of the Royal Knights will have fewer worries today, and he will be able to rest a little. The main character recalled the events of the previous night. The commander of the Royal Knights urgently had to return to his subordinates due to the problems that the pouring rain constantly creates. Lady Calyps thought about how the last time she spent a night with her husband was after the celebratory banquet that had been held in her honor. The girl immediately felt embarrassed by such thoughts. She should be more modest in her thoughts. Suddenly, the young Duchess's personal maid entered her room and wished her good morning. The main character also greeted the maid. The girl expressed her joy at the good weather that sometimes occurs during the rainy season. After that, the main character looked at the bouquet of flowers that her husband gave her. Lady Calypso again felt warmth inside herself and gratitude to her beloved man for his care and support. The girl was a little upset because the beautiful blue flowers began to fade a little and lose their former freshness. The main character's personal maid noticed her mistress's embarrassment and said that these flowers could be dried and preserved for a long time when they completely withered. The girl liked this idea. Lady Calyps's mood improved again, and she sincerely thanked her maid for her excellent service and moral support throughout. After that, the main character went to the library to continue her studies and also to study the account books. It turned out to be a very difficult job for the young Duchess, but she does not give up. After several hours of incessant study, Lady Calyps became very tired and decided to rest a little, laying her head on the writing desk. Several minutes passed like this. Suddenly, the main character thought of her husband and decided to be like him in his righteous and tireless work. She must match her husband. The young Duchess's personal maid came to the library. She informed her mistress that Riftan Calyps would be dining with his comrades in the common room tonight. The maid was interested in knowing whether the lady would be present at the feast. The main character was at first a little frightened and embarrassed by these words of her maid, but she quickly collected her thoughts and replied that she would finish her business early today and would be able to attend the dinner party with the knights. Evening came. Lady Calyps came to the banquet hall and again met the estate manager at the door, who greeted her respectfully. Rodrigo Serich invited his mistress to go into the banquet hall and wished her a pleasant evening in all respects. The main character entered the room and immediately noticed that there was a rather tense atmosphere there. Riftan Calyps is in a heated argument with his subordinate and tells him that he only wants to go to the capital to see King Reuben in 3 days. The subordinate of the captain of the Royal Knights disagrees with his superior. He says that the king will no longer wait for Riftan Calyps to deign to honor him with his presence. Delay may bring the wrath of the ruler. It will do no good to anyone. The assistant commander listened attentively to the young knight and also agreed with him. Although this had never happened before, the commander of the Royal Knights listened to his comrades and said that the rainy season was not over yet. Let the ruler think that all the roads to the capital had become impassable. A younger knight intervened in the conversation, deciding to support his brothers in arms and bring the commander to his senses. He said that King Reuben III was always angry if the captain of the Royal Knights did not come to him to bow after the end of a military expedition. The young knight added that he understood perfectly well his commander's motives for keeping his distance from the king and his enterprising daughter Agnes. But Riftan Calips would sooner or later have to attend a personal audience with King Reuben III. The order and court etiquette demanded it. The young warrior said that the fruits of a 3-year military campaign could not be allowed to go to someone else, because the king would be angry with the captain of the Dragon Knights. The main character listens attentively to this lively conversation of the Royal Knights and understands that she has let her husband down again. The girl thought about how she prevented the captain of the Dragon Knights from immediately heading to the capital and visiting the king. These sad thoughts and assumptions caused Lady Calips to have another panic attack. Could it be that her beloved husband would suffer because of her? It was terrible. The main character did not enter the banquet hall and disturb the Royal Knights. They should be busy with their important affairs and not be distracted by all sorts of trifles. The girl decided to return to her chambers, which greatly surprised her loyal servants. The personal maid asked the mistress what she should do with her lunch. The main character answered the maid that she could bring the lunch to her room. After these words, Lady Calips, in proud solitude and in a terrible mood, headed to her chambers. A few minutes later, the main character found herself in her room and became even sadder from the realization that her husband would leave her in 3 days. The main character thought about the current situation. She strokes the winged unicorn statue with her left finger and tries to accept what is happening. Suddenly, the young duchess heard familiar steps. The captain of the Royal Knights entered the room and said that he had been informed about his wife's illness. He recommended that the girl go to bed early today. The main character replied that her husband should also rest. He deserved it more than anyone else. The young aristocrat said this and thought that perhaps her husband had started avoiding her because he was already tired of her. It was just awful. The girl's happiness had not lasted long. The main character looked at her husband and said that she was glad of the sunny weather today. But Riftan Calips replied that he needed rain that would last forever. Then he wouldn't have to go to the capital and leave his wife in a state. Lady Calips tried to read a book before going to bed. Meanwhile, the captain of the Royal Knights took his huge sword, which has outstanding magical properties. The main character watches her husband, who for some reason is silent all the time and examines his magic blade. The captain of the Royal Knights looked up from his magical weapon for a moment and noticed that his young wife was watching him closely. The knight asked the girl what had happened to her. The main character replied that her master should not polish his sword himself. This task should be done by servants or squires. But Riftan Calips replied that he had been polishing his blade since he was 14 and could not do without it. The captain of the Royal Knights added that this sword was the best weapon in the entire kingdom of Whedon. He received it as a reward for winning his first knightly tournament. Riftan Calips indulges in memories of his early youth and first steps on the knightly path. The main heroine listens attentively to her husband and admires his exploits. The young duchess remembered her life at the Cross Estate. The girl's cruel father also attended knightly tournaments, but he always took only the main character's sister Rosetta with him. The girl could only learn something about these tournaments from books. Chivalric romances completely captured the imagination of the main character, who plunged into them headlong to escape from the cruel and oppressive reality. Lady Calips looked closely at her husband and thought that he had most likely broken the hearts of many beautiful ladies who had rooted for the captain of the Royal Knights at numerous tournaments. After these thoughts, the girl began to have a panic attack again. She thought that she could lose her gorgeous husband at any moment if he went to the capital and got close to Princess Agnes. The main character calmed down a little and asked her husband what he thought about the kiss of a beautiful lady, which a noble knight receives as a reward for his service or heroic deeds. The captain of the Royal Knights listened attentively to his wife and replied that all this was romantic nonsense from stupid books. For a real knight, the most important thing is to fulfill his combat mission. But something tells the main character that her husband is cheating on her now. Maybe he doesn't want to upset the girl. But the young duchess knows that every knight has his own beautiful lady of the heart, with whom he is forever bound by an oath. The main character has long suspected that Riftan Calips has a secret lady of the heart, to whom he once gave an oath of fidelity. If this is true, then the young Duchess simply will not survive it. Depressed by such thoughts, the girl thinks about the current situation. She does not know what to do now. Maybe it is worth somehow finding out the truth about the secret lady of the heart, which Riftan Calyps so carefully hides. Suddenly, the captain of the Royal Knights put his magic sword aside and rose from his seat. Riftan Calyps came close to his wife and looked into her eyes. This made the girl wary. After this, the young nobleman hugged his wife and said that she looked bad today. The girl should get a good night's sleep and banish all bad thoughts right now. She also needs to watch her diet and work less in the library. The main character appreciated her master's care and thanked him for these warm words. Lady Calyps thought for a moment and added that she was quite healthy. There was a little fatigue, but it would soon pass. The head of the Royal Knights looked at his wife carefully and said that she had worked very hard in the library today. The girl should take care of herself so as not to get sick. Riftan Calyps looked around and noticed that there was a strange toy on the table that he had not seen in the room before. The girl said that it was a model of a new chandelier for the banquet hall that she wanted to order from a merchant. The main character asked if maybe she shouldn't buy this expensive chandelier and leave everything as it is. But the captain of the Royal Knights said that his wife was doing everything right. After this, the young nobleman stroked a lock of his wife's hair and said that soon she would need a luxurious banquet hall, because her husband would arrange the best celebrations in the Kingdom of Whedon in her honor. Meanwhile, the captain of the Royal Knights brought a lock of his wife's hair to his lips and kissed it tenderly, looking into his wife's eyes. A few moments later, the young nobleman gently stroked his wife's cheek and said that she would soon have everything she wanted. She just needed to be patient. Riftan Calyps continues to caress his wife. He said that in a couple of days he must go to the capital of the kingdom to pay a courtesy visit to the ruler Reuben III. After that, the captain of the Royal Knights will return and bring with him a huge number of gifts. The main character listened attentively to her master and sadly turned away from him. The girl does not want Riftan Calyps to leave her here alone. The captain of the Royal Knights said that he did not want to leave for the capital of the kingdom, but his duty to the king and the fatherland obliged him. The young aristocrat wants to stay with his wife and continue to live a measured life on his family estate. The main character's husband added that he wanted to lie around in bed with her all day long, doing nothing and enjoying her tender caresses. Lady Calyps looks closely at her husband and regrets only that she cannot help him in this situation. After that, the captain of the Royal Knights helplessly laid his head on his wife's lap and fell silent. The girl began to stroke his thick black hair, trying to somehow console him. The main character understands that her husband is now very unhappy. He shed his blood for 3 years in a cruel war, where he risked his life every day. But now, when happiness is so close to the young knight, he urgently needs to leave his home and his beloved again. Meanwhile, Riftan Calyps's companions discuss the current situation. Wizard Root says that if the pouring rain does not stop, they will have to postpone their trip to the capital of the Kingdom of Whedon again. The first mate of the captain of the Royal Knights hastened to calm the sorcerer and said that the commander always knows what he is doing, so no one should worry in this situation. Another knight intervened and said that the king would be very unhappy that the commander of the Dragon Knights had not honored him with a visit after the end of the 3-year campaign. This could cause many problems in the near future for all who served Riftan Calyps. The knights asked the sorcerer if she considered the captain of the Royal Knights a superman because he was capable of such heroic deeds that were not typical of ordinary people. The sorcerer replied that his interlocutors were talking complete nonsense. The commander was an ordinary knight who could punish almost anyone for such talk. The younger knight asked the sorcerer how long he had known Riftan Calyps. He had heard that the wizard had known the captain of the Royal Knights since the beginning of his military career. Wizard Ruth replied to the young fighter that he had met the gentleman when he was 16 years old. That was quite a long time. All the knights present were very surprised when they heard the words of the sorcerer. They asked him to tell them about the 16-year-old commander. The sorcerer Ruth listened attentively to the request of his interlocutors and said that there was almost no difference between the young and the current captain. Riftan Calyps, at the age of 16, managed to kill his first dragon, plunging his magic sword into it almost to the hilt. In the past, the captain of the Royal Knights was more cruel and reckless and lived only for today because he could die at any moment. Riftan's assistant Calypsa listened attentively to the wizard's story about his commander and decided to joke about it. He said that now the captain of the Royal Knights does not have to live for today. He has concerns more important than war. For example, a young and beautiful wife whom he found in the Cross Duchy. This stupid joke made all the men present laugh, except for the wizard Ruth. He silently thought about the current situation and his master's prospects. They did not seem very bright to him. A new day has come. Riftan Callips and his young wife have locked themselves in their room and do not leave it, spending all the time together before their imminent separation. The newlyweds decided to stay in bed longer today. The captain of the Royal Knights asked his wife how she felt today. The girl answered that she was fine. After this, the young nobleman offered his wife some wine to cheer her up. The girl said that she could pour herself some wine whenever she wanted. The main character is now deep in thought because of her husband's upcoming departure. But the captain of the Royal Knights continued to insist. He brought the glass of wine to his wife's lips and told her not to move now. After that, the nobleman forced his wife to drink a few sips of the sweet and aromatic drink. The main character barely listens to what her husband is telling her now. She is completely immersed in her thoughts, which do not allow her to fully relax and find peace even in bed with her loved one. Riftan Callips decided to feed his wife grapes. The girl is not particularly enthusiastic this time either. She does not want to lie in bed now. She wants to get busy with the arrangement of her new home as soon as possible. The captain of the Royal Knights hugged his wife and said that everything would be fine. The girl chews grapes and politely agrees with her husband. The main character noticed that she accidentally scratched her husband at night. She asked him if he was upset with her for that. The girl did it by accident and will try to make sure that it doesn't happen again. The captain of the Royal Knights replied that he was fine. This often happens to young spouses in the heat of passion. And let Lady Callips not worry about such trifles. For a real man, such scratches are the best evidence that he is a wonderful lover. The girl looked at her husband carefully and asked if he needed any ointment. She could bring it to her husband right away if he wanted it. Riftan Callips thought for a moment and said that he could not be injured by fire-breathing dragons during bloody battles. But his beloved wife managed to do so. Therefore, she is the most dangerous creature in the world. So the commander of the Royal Knights jokes. But, as you know, there is a grain of truth in every joke. The young nobleman looks at his wife and says that from the first meeting with her, he knew that she would be able to cover him with wounds. The girl was very surprised by these mysterious words of her husband. Thus passed the whole day and night. The young spouses spent all their time together without leaving their chambers. The morning of the next day came, which foretells new events that will have a fateful influence on the lives of the aristocrats in love. The main character woke up from the sunlight that flooded her room. The girl found herself alone in her bed. Her husband had gone somewhere on important business. Lady Callips came to her senses a little and turned her attention to the maids who were currently cleaning her chambers. The girl asked the maids where her husband was now. One of the maids told the young mistress that Riftan Callips was currently making preparations for his upcoming departure, which would take place at noon today. This information greatly excited the main character. The girl hurried to leave her bed in order to also prepare for her husband's departure and to see him off on his long journey as befits a loving wife. The main character changed her clothes and ran out into the street. She wants to quickly find her husband to spend time with him before he leaves. For Lady Callips, this is very important. Meanwhile, Riftan Callips is giving a speech to a group of royal knights. He wants to convey important information to his subordinates that they absolutely must know. The captain of the Royal Knights loudly declared to everyone present on the parade ground that all warriors who took part in the 3-year campaign were obliged to attend the victory parade that would soon take place in the capital. When the commander finished his speech, the wizard Ruth took the floor. He said that the captain of the Royal Knights was absolutely right in this situation. Only a few knights who would remain here could guard Anatol's castle. The magician also planned not to leave the city. Riftan Callips thanked the wizard for his support and said that he would be much calmer if the sorcerer remained in Anatol's castle and guarded it. After this, the young nobleman looked around and noticed something strange. It seemed that his wife was secretly watching the gathering of knights. The captain of the Royal Knights noticed that Lady Callips was standing behind one of the columns, watching him and his subordinates. The girl did not want to reveal her presence so as not to become a hindrance to her husband. The main character thought for a long time about how to approach her master in order to keep him company and not become a burden. But nothing comes to her mind. Therefore, the girl prefers to hide behind a column and not to displease Riftan Callips. Suddenly, Lady Callips saw that her husband had finished communicating with his subordinates and was heading towards her. The main character was very surprised by this, because she did not expect such a development of events. The young Duchess greeted her husband and said that she had come to visit him and inform him that the food for the knights was ready. Therefore, they could set off on their journey in peace. Riftan Calips thanked his wife and turned to his subordinates. The captain of the royal knights ordered his fighters to leave for lunch. After this, the young nobleman asked his mistress how she was feeling and whether she was showing any signs of depression due to her husband leaving her for some time. The captain of the royal knights smiled mysteriously and said that everything was quite clear. His wife was not only in perfect health, but also looked blooming and rosy. After this, the young nobleman approached his wife and said that she was the standard of innocence and purity for him. Riftan Calips thought for a moment and hugged his wife tightly. He said that he really didn't want to leave her now, but business and duties called him. A knight must serve his king, no matter how sad it was. The girl also hugs her master tightly in anticipation of an imminent separation. She does not want to remain without him in the Anatol estate. This house will be empty without its owner. The loving couple stood there, embracing for a few minutes. After that, Riftan Calips told his wife that the other knights were waiting for them for a farewell dinner. The main character agreed with her master, and they headed to the castle. When the farewell dinner was over, the captain of the royal knights and his subordinates saddled their horses and prepared to leave the castle of Anatol. Riftan Calips told his wife that he would return soon. The girl replied that she would wait for him. The main character thought for a moment and asked her master to be very careful on the way. There are many different monsters everywhere that are hungry for human flesh. The young nobleman looked at his wife carefully and thought that her parting words would serve as a talisman for him on his long and dangerous journey. This is exactly what he needs more than anything else in the world now. After this, the captain of the royal knights kissed his wife hard in front of his subordinates. This greatly embarrassed the young duchess, but she understands that now this is quite acceptable, and no one will judge her for it. Riftan Calips smiled meaningfully at his wife and told her again that he would return home no matter what. Only here could he find his happiness again. The main character looked her master in the eyes and said that she would wait for him impatiently all day and night. After this, the captain of the royal knights loudly ordered his comrades to set out immediately. Lady Calips stands on the observation platform of the watchtower and watches her husband's detachment, who went to visit the ruler of the kingdom of Whedon. When the knight's detachment disappeared over the horizon, the main character went down to the courtyard and looked at the closed castle gates. Suddenly, the manager Rodrigo Seric approached the girl and said that the captain of the royal knights had changed a lot lately. The main character heard the estate manager and asked him what he had just said. Perhaps this should be explained a little. Rodrigo Seric listened attentively to his mistress and said that for the first time in his life he had heard Riftan Calips tell someone that he would return to him. And it all happened thanks to the young duchess. The main character was very surprised at first when she heard the words of the estate manager. But after coming to her senses a little, the girl realized that he was absolutely right. The head of the royal knights had really changed a lot since his arrival at the Cross estate. Rodrigo Seric said that before the master always took care of his subordinates, but this did not stop him from leaving the family estate for a long time. And no one knew whether Riftan Calips would return to his home or leave this castle and its inhabitants forever. But now everything has changed with the arrival of the young duchess. The main character listened carefully to the estate manager and realized that it was only thanks to her that Riftan Calips began to perceive Anatol Castle as his home. Suddenly, the young duchess's personal maid appeared next to Rodrigo Seric. The servants hesitated for a moment, but then gathered their strength and said that they were very happy about Maximiliana Calips's presence in the Anatol Castle. The main character listened attentively to her servants and she began to have a panic attack from excitement. The girl thought again that she did not deserve such kind words addressed to her. Lady Calips received a very strong psychological trauma from her father in childhood. And now it is difficult for her not only to believe in herself, but also to believe the good opinion of the people around her. The main character must prove to herself that she is worthy of being called the real mistress of the Anatol estate. The young duchess must learn to overcome her fears. The girl began to nervously wrinkle her dress again due to a panic attack. But from now on, she must fight it little by little to gain true freedom. If all the inhabitants of Anatol's estate begin to treat the main character the way her cruel father did, the girl simply won't be able to survive it. The evening came. The main character felt very bad because of her husband's departure. This emotional void was filled with worries and phobias, which led to the girl's illness. Lady Calips has fallen ill from nervousness and is bedridden. The maids are looking after the girl and are very worried about her. The main character has developed a severe fever that has been going on for several hours. It may be a consequence of excessive exertion of forces recently. The young Duchess's personal maid ordered the younger maid to go to the wizard route and get some medicinal herbs from him for the young mistress. The real reason for the main character's illness was her struggle with past fears that had firmly settled in her innocent soul. The girl must go through this crisis and become much stronger by cleansing herself from the influence of her cruel father. Meanwhile, the captain of the Royal Knights quickly rushes on his horse through the night forest, accompanied by his faithful companions. He does not pay attention to the difficulties and obstacles that stand in his way. The young gentleman thinks only of his lady love. Riftan Calyps wants to get things done quickly and return to his family estate, where he has found long-awaited happiness. The brave commander is not interested in anything else. The captain of the Royal Knights shouted loudly that anyone who fell behind in the night forest would be left alone. The squad had no time to rescue the stragglers from trouble. All the knights heard this order and took it into account. 2 days passed. All this time, the main character lay in her bed with a strong fever. But today she felt better, and she was able to get out of bed to stretch and breathe fresh air. The main character stands on the balcony and carefully watches the simple inhabitants of her family estate. These people are very interesting to the girl, who wants to get new useful knowledge about her home. Lady Calyps noticed a boy who was working hard to carry water in a wooden bucket. The girl thought that in this castle, everyone began working at an early age. The parents praised the child when he did his job well. The main character had never experienced this in the past. The girl's cruel father always scolded her. Lady Calyps also wants to contribute to the improvement of her native estate and be truly useful in this matter for all the inhabitants of Anatol Castle. Then she will be able to feel happy. The girl looks at the blue sky. She stretched out her hand to the smoky clouds, which symbolize her dreams, which seem so unattainable to her. Maybe all the goals that the young mistress of the estate wants to achieve will forever remain just empty dreams of a stupid and poorly educated girl. The main character continues to look at the sky. Suddenly, she thought about her mother, whom her cruel father considered absolutely useless. So she died. From black despair, will the young Duchess also have to inherit a similar fate? Suddenly, Lady Calyps's personal maid appeared on the balcony and interrupted her sad thoughts by calling her. The main character shuddered in surprise. The girl realized the simple fact that if she did not stop thinking negatively now, she would again end up in bed with a fever. Lady Calyps was once again so upset by her depressive thoughts that she began to unconsciously crumple the fabric of her cape, which her personal maid had just thrown over her shoulders so that she would not catch a cold. The main character looked at the sky again, which gradually began to paint itself in sunset colors. The girl thought that she should improve her home. Then Riftan Calyps would never abandon her. From that moment on, Lady Calyps decided to change forever in order to be worthy of her husband and master, who showed her what true human happiness is. The next day, the main character decided to take the wizard Ruth, who has extensive knowledge in various fields, as her assistant. This step should move all attempts of the young Duchess to engage in economic activity in the Anatol estate from dead center. The girl brought the sorcerer to the library and showed him the account books she had recently tried to check. The wizard immediately determined that these books contained many mathematical and financial errors that required immediate correction. The main character looks closely at her assistant and cannot understand anything he is trying to explain to her about finances. The girl simply does not have the necessary knowledge for this. Wizard Ruth began to explain to Lady Calyps the differences between various monetary units and currencies. The wizard also tried to explain to the girl how to compare them correctly. After that, the magician carefully studied the account books again and said that it was necessary to make a global inventory of all funds. If the main character continued to manage the estate's financial affairs in the same spirit, the captain of the Royal Knights would soon go bankrupt. Lady Calyps listened attentively to her interlocutor and became very upset. The girl said that all this happened because she did not know how to properly manage financial affairs. The wizard said that the young Duchess should have informed the estate manager about this. Then there would not have been such problems from the very beginning of her activity as the estate's financier. Lady Calyps is not satisfied with this. The main character looked at the young wizard and said that she couldn't tell the servants about her incompetence. Otherwise, they would laugh at her and wouldn't respect her as the real mistress of the estate. The sorcerer did not expect such a development of events. He was very surprised when he heard the words of his mistress and promised that he would not tell anyone anything and would sort out the account books himself without outside help. This pleased Lady Calypso, and she agreed with her assistant's proposal. The main character is happy that she now has an assistant who understands financial matters. The girl remembered how she started collaborating with the young magician a few days ago. It all started when Lady Calypso again encountered the fact that she was completely confused in financial calculations. She was very tired of this and found herself at a dead end. The girl heads to the library to once again immerse herself in the financial reports that she doesn't understand. In the corridor, she meets several maids who bow respectfully to her. The main character worked in the library all day, but still couldn't really achieve anything. This really depresses her. Evening came unnoticed. Lady Calypso is very tired of constantly working with financial papers, which she still does not understand anything about. And she does not have a friend who could help her understand all this. The main character holds a writing pen in her hand and looks at it carefully. She does not know whether she should continue to engage in this useless and meaningless activity. The girl is absolutely horrified by the fact that she has accumulated a huge list of things that she needs to buy. But she does not know how to make the right purchases and calculate the budget of the Anatol estate. Lady Calypso cannot let her beloved husband down. She must, at all costs, achieve success and learn to use the money entrusted to her to ennoble her home. In complete despair, the main character laid her head on the desk and sighed heavily from the impotence to change anything in the current situation. Suddenly, the main character heard a strange sound in a dark corner of the library, which seemed to her like the rustling sound that occurs when a person moves. This surprised the girl because she thought that she was in the library all alone. Lady Calypso rose from her desk to take a better look at the dark corner of the library and check the veracity of her guesses. A few moments later, the girl became convinced that there was another person in the library with her, whom she could not yet see well because he was in the shadows and did not want to come out into the light. The main character continues to watch the uninvited guest. She was very scared and for a moment thought that it was some thief or bandit who had secretly made his way into the estate. There was an awkward pause for a few seconds, which the mysterious stranger decided to immediately break. It turned out to be the wizard Ruth, who also likes to spend his free time in the library in search of new knowledge. He greeted his mistress and said that she had become too impressionable lately. The sorcerer sat down on the desk opposite the main character. He said that he wanted to sleep among the books in the library, because there is always silence here. But Lady Calypso did not allow him to rest peacefully with her loud sighs and moans. The wizard thought for a moment and added that a normal person could not engage in intellectual work so loudly. He could not understand why the young lady was constantly sighing over some books. Lady Calypso did not expect such a turn of events. She asked her interlocutor if her sighs were really so loud that they disturbed the sorcerer and did not allow him to rest. The young magician replied that this was exactly how it was. After this, the wizard asked his mistress if she knew that she was disturbing his sleep. Only now did the girl realize that all this time while she was working in the library, the sorcerer Ruth had been secretly watching her and had not let her know of his presence. This was terribly embarrassing for her. The main character thought for a moment and answered her interlocutor that she had no idea he was in the library. That's why the girl sighed loudly. The young wizard listened carefully to his mistress and said that the library was a place where one must always behave very quietly, so as not to disturb other visitors who were going about their business. Lady Calypso was taken aback by the unheard-of impudence of her subordinate. She began to get a little angry at the wizard and said that the library should not be used as a bedroom. The sorcerer Root was afraid of his mistress's anger and immediately admitted his mistake. He said that he was very sorry that the main character did not know about his passion for relaxing in the library of the Anatol estate. The wizard thought for a moment and added that he had slept in the library that night because he had been called to the bedside of the young duchess for several nights in a row, who had spent those days in a fever. This made the main character immediately change her anger to mercy. The girl realized that she owed her recovery to the young wizard, who had been making herbal infusions for her in the middle of the night. Lady Calypso realized that she had been a little hasty, and too hasty in her conclusions about the young wizard who had cured her, and perhaps even saved her life. The young wizard looked at his mistress and said that he was very sorry that she had spent several days in a fever, but now everything was all right, and that was very good. The wizard Ruth added that he was always happy to serve his mistress and her husband, whom he respected very much. Everyone should do their job to the best of their ability. This is what the wizard did when he treated Lady Calypso. After this, the young wizard turned his attention to the ledgers and scrolls lying on the desk. The sorcerer took one of the accounting scrolls and said that he understood perfectly well why his mistress spent her days in the library. The young wizard wondered if the main character had made any progress in her research. The young man unrolled the scroll to read its contents. The young duchess began to protest against this and asked the young wizard not to read what was written in this document. This seemed very strange to the wizard, but all these requests of the young duchess were in vain. The wizard Ruth had already begun to read the accounting list, and his eyes widened in surprise and indignation when he read the document to the very end. The young man finished reading the accounting report, got up from the table without saying anything to his mistress, and headed towards the library exit. The main character was very surprised by her subordinate's behavior. She noticed that the wizard took the document with him, so she asked him to return it. The young sorcerer turned and looked intently at his mistress. He asked the girl how much money she had already spent on the arrangement of Anatol's estate. The main character was very embarrassed when she heard the young sorcerer's question. The young duchess replied that the captain of the royal knights told her that she could not worry about the amount of money spent on repairing the estate. The young man looked at the mistress of the estate and said that if she needed his help in managing her financial affairs, he would be happy to help his mistress. Otherwise, his commander would soon become a complete financial bankrupt. From that day on, Lady Calyps began taking personal lessons in financial literacy from the sorcerer Ruth. Several days have passed. The young wizard and the main character are studying the accounting of the Anatol estate in the library. The young wizard told his mistress that she should also ask for help from a person like Rodrigo Siric. The main character replied that she could not do this for reasons already known to her interlocutor. She did not want to look stupid and incompetent in front of her servants. The young man looked at his interlocutor carefully and said that she was the same adventurer as her beloved husband. In this regard, they are very similar. The main character answered that she is very different from her husband. The captain of the royal knights is famous for his responsibility, unlike his incompetent wife. Riftan Calyps is a great man, according to the duchess. Wizard Ruth listens attentively to his mistress and does not believe his ears. He knows the commander of the royal knights much better than his young wife. Riftan Calyps has never been a responsible person. He has always been interested only in victories in war. Lady Calyps's financial literacy tutor thought for a moment and said that that was enough for today. It was time to rest. The main character couldn't believe her luck when she heard these words. The girl was very tired today, so she laid her head on the desk and thanked her teacher for the opportunity to rest. When the young people were returning to Anatol's castle, Lady Calyps said that thanks to her mentor, she was able to significantly reduce her financial expenses. Wizard Ruth replied that the girl should have done this much earlier, but pride and complexes prevented her from doing so. Suddenly, the young wizard stopped in front of a large dried-up tree as the interlocutors passed by the once beautiful greenhouse. The main character did not expect such a turn of events. She also stopped and asked her companion why he stopped so abruptly now. The young wizard answered his mistress that he knew about her plans for the improvement of the greenhouse. The girl answered the young man that she had such plans, but she did not know whether her husband would like them. The sorcerer Ruth looks closely at the withered tree in front of which he stopped. After thinking for a while, the young wizard said that the servants would be very worried if the mistress ordered this dead legacy of a bygone era to be uprooted. The main character listened attentively to her interlocutor and looked at the dry branches of the tree, which, in her opinion, only took up extra space. The girl said that it would be appropriate to use this dried plant for firewood. This would bring at least some benefit to the estate. The young man answered the lady that the locals believe that magical creatures live in the trees, and it doesn't matter to them whether the trees are alive or dry. People will be wary of cutting down this once majestic oak. Lady Calyps listened attentively to her interlocutor and asked what was so special about oak trees according to local beliefs. The young wizard continued to look at the dry oak tree. He thought for a moment and said that the young duchess most likely knew the famous story of Sir Wigro. The main character replied that she had heard about it for the first time in her life. The young man was a little surprised when he heard his mistress's answer and decided to tell her this instructive legend. Sir Wigro was the knight who stopped a long-term bloody war thanks to his magic blade, which was given to him by the ancient gods. Thus, this legendary hero laid the foundations of the Rome Empire. An ancient legend says that Sir Wigro fulfilled his destiny and ascended to heaven on his white dragon. The inhabitants of the city of Anatol believe that before leaving this earthly world, Sir Wigro fell in love with a beautiful nymph who lived in the branches of a mighty oak tree. but by the will of fate, the lovers were destined to part. The brave knight went to heaven on his white dragon, and the beautiful nymph remained to wait for her beloved on the branches of the oak tree, which she protects with her presence. That is why locals believe that all trees are sacred, and especially oaks. After all, on one of them, the legendary nymph is waiting for her groom. The local girls believe so strongly in this romantic legend that every year they go out into the fields and sing hymns of praise and songs of the true love of the wood nymph and Sir Wigrow. The young wizard finished his story and again looked carefully at the mighty dried oak tree that stood majestically before him. The main character listened carefully to her mentor and said that now she understood everything. If Lady Clips ordered to cut down this dried oak, then the inhabitants of Anatol's castle would stop loving and respecting her. The sorcerer Ruth confirmed his mistress's guess. He looked intently at the young duchess and said that the locals would secretly hate the mistress and would not show it too openly, so as not to receive a cruel punishment for this from Riftan Calyps, who was very quick to punish. The girl listened attentively to her mentor and thought about his words. The main character found herself at a dead end again. She doesn't know what to do with the huge dried-up tree that is in the yard of her estate and takes up extra space and also spoils the view. Lady Calyps was starting to get nervous about this. She felt like she was going to have another panic attack soon if she didn't do something about it now. The young wizard looked at his mistress attentively and thought that something was wrong with her. It was necessary to calm the impressionable girl down immediately. Wizard Ruth thought for a moment and told his interlocutor that he would do everything possible to revive this majestic oak tree that could not be cut down. Perhaps something would come of it if he put forth the necessary efforts. Several days have passed. In the kitchen, the maids are peeling potatoes and discussing the latest news. The girls also praise Maximiliana Calyps for working hard in the library, wanting to revive the dry oak, and for once saving one of the maids from the wrath of Riftan Calyps by standing up for her. After that, the workers began to discuss the appearance and heroism of the captain of the Royal Knights. Each of these girls dreams of such a man. The first maid said that Riftan Calyps changes a lot when he is next to his wife. He becomes joyful, gentle, and kind. It suits him very well. The second maid agreed with her interlocutor. She said that the rumors about the engagement of the captain of the Royal Knights with the princess turned out to be false gossip. Otherwise, Riftan Calyps would never have brought the young duchess to his castle as a mistress. The head cook suddenly interrupted the gossiping conversation and said that it was time for them to stop using their tongues and start working more with their hands. There were still a lot of potatoes to peel in order to prepare enough food. The first maid said that everything would be ready on time and the head chef's reputation would not suffer. In Anatol's castle, as always, there would be the most delicious food that would give a head start to the dishes of the capital. The chef smiled and said that he was very happy when his work was praised. He especially liked it when the dishes he prepared were to the taste of the young lady. The first maid listened attentively to the cook and said that Lady Calyps gave special preference to aromatic tea with special local sweets that were not available anywhere else in the entire kingdom of Whedon. The chef agreed with his interlocutor and said that the young duchess would forever love the Chateau Anatol, thanks to its signature dishes, which he prepares for the girl with great love. Meanwhile, Lady Calyps and her tutor once again indulged in tireless intellectual labor in the library. These studies became a daily tradition. The sorcerer Ruth carefully read the latest financial report, and for some reason again became sad and sighed heavily after reading it. The main character looks closely at her mentor and realizes that she has again made some mistake when preparing the financial report. But this time, Lady Calyps's fears were in vain. The young wizard put the document on the desk and sighed with relief. He said that now, finally, everything was in order with the papers. There were no errors. The main character listened attentively to her mentor and could not believe her happiness. The girl also sighed with relief and said that she was very happy that she had made the correct financial report. The training had yielded results. Now Lady Calyps is well-versed in all the currencies that circulate in the kingdom of Whedon and can easily compare and count them. Only now did the girl realize how many stupid mistakes she had made earlier and how much money her husband had lost forever because of them. The young wizard was also very tired after all these days of financial education for his mistress. The young man asked the girl what else she wanted to know today. Suddenly, the main character became interested in why the Kingdom of Whedon still uses coins that were in circulation during the time of the Rome Empire. The young wizard listened attentively to his mistress and was very surprised by her intelligence. He said that he did not expect this question from Lady Calyps. Wizard Ruth thought a little about his answer to the young duchess. He had to explain everything simply and clearly to a girl who was just beginning to learn all the intricacies of economic science. Having collected his thoughts, the mentor asked the main character what she knew about the Western continent. The girl answered that there were 7 kingdoms on it, including the state of Whedon. The young sorcerer listened to his student and spread a detailed geographical map on the table in front of her. He said that the entire Western continent had previously been under the rule of the Great Rome Empire. Before this, the entire continent was divided into 10 independent states. But one day, King Darian and the 10 main knights from each of the independent states united into a single union, creating the Rome Empire. Centuries passed, and the Great Rome Empire disintegrated into 7 new kingdoms. One of them is called Whedon. The collapse of the Great Empire of Rome led to long civil wars, which were distinguished by their cruelty. But 30 years ago, 7 kingdoms concluded a peace treaty to unite against numerous and powerful monsters, which became a mortal threat to all states. Therefore, the currency of the Great Empire Rome continues to be used in all 7 kingdoms that have entered into a friendly alliance. It is a sign of the unity of the states and a useful economic tool that greatly facilitates trade between the kingdoms. The main character's mentor was silent for a while and then continued his story. He said that the young Duchess's father had rushed to take advantage of the situation. The old Duke Cross had decided to amass enormous wealth and acquire powerful power thanks to his insidious and cunning intrigues. Duke Cross managed to take possession of lands that once belonged to the imperial family. But after the collapse of the empire, these plots legally belonged to the state of Riftan. After the signing of the peace treaty, the kingdom of Riftan began to insist on the return of its lands. In this situation, the main character's father almost lost half of all the lands that belonged to him. He needed to do something immediately to improve his situation. Therefore, Duke Cross decided to marry Arian Roem Gerda, the direct heir of the imperial family. This girl later became the mother of the main character. Thus, Duke Cross was able to resolve his land disputes with the neighboring kingdom. This famous story is known to all residents of the 7 states. The young sorcerer paused and added that now the father of the young duchess wanted to strengthen his position even more and marry his daughter to the emperor or one of his relatives. Rosetta Cross was to play a major role in this matter. Lady Callips listened carefully to her mentor and finally understood everything. The girl realized why her father treated her so badly. He had placed his main bet on his second daughter, Rosetta, and Maximiliana was given in marriage to a knight who took her to the ends of the earth so that she would not become a hindrance to her sister. The unfortunate girl only now realized that her family had always treated her as a residual, as expendable material, and not as a member of the family. It was simply terrible. The young duchess felt that the hateful and disgusting panic attack was creeping up on her again. The sorcerer Ruth noticed his mistress's embarrassment. He hastened to calm the girl down and said that he did not want to put her in an awkward position. The wizard only wanted to show his student that the Roem name still carried weight in the aristocratic society of the Kingdom of Whedon. Lady Callips listened attentively to her mentor and said that she did not feel any embarrassment at the moment. She was just thinking for a while. The young wizard was very glad that he had not upset his mistress. He sighed with relief and tried to explain to the girl why the coins of the southern continent were so small. This was done in order to save resources. After that, the main character's mentor pointed his finger at the geographical map lying on the desk and said that the most valuable coin in all the kingdoms is the currency of the Rome house, which is called Daunt. This is the main thing that the girl needs to know. It is said that there are only 600 Daunts left in the world. 160 of them belong to Riftan Callips. This information greatly interested the main character. The wizard Ruth said that the captain of the Royal Knights found these 160 Daunts 6 years ago during his military campaign. This is a real treasure that gives its owner great wealth and power. But such a person has no fewer enemies. In fact, Riftan Callips got 200 Daunts during his next military campaign, but he had to spend 40 Daunts on strengthening and repairing the Anatol castle. The main character listens attentively to her interlocutor and is surprised that such a huge amount of work could be organized for only 40 imperial Dante. The sorcerer Ruth said that the captain of the Royal Knights would have had enough to repair the castle of Anatol and 20 imperial Daunts. But he was in a hurry, so he spent more money than he should have. The main character noticed that every time the conversation turns to the money of the commander of the Royal Knights, the young wizard begins to get angry and furious. He is very concerned about the well-being of his master, thus showing his loyalty and love for him. The young wizard thought for a moment and told his mistress that Riftan Calyps had already spent a huge amount of money on the restoration of Anatol Castle and would spend even more in the future. Therefore, the wizard Ruth would no longer allow senseless spending of money. Lady Calyps should understand this once and for all. The main character listened attentively to her mentor. The girl fully supports the thrifty wizard who protects the well-being of his master and his possessions. Lady Calyps thought for a moment and quickly called a representative of the Merchant Guild to inform him that she wants to immediately reduce her order for the repair of the estate. The merchant was very upset when he heard about the reduction of the order. He said that self-respecting aristocrats should not act like that, but Lady Calyps replied that she had already made her decision, which was not subject to discussion. The main character thought that now she knew how she would act further. And most importantly, she would no longer listen to the moralizing of the sorcerer Root about saving money. Life goes on as usual in Anatol's estate. The representative of the trade guild fulfills all his obligations on time and delivers the necessary goods to the castle. The repairs continue successfully. Thanks to the well-coordinated work of the estate's inhabitants and the correct leadership of the young duchess, the castle gradually began to transform for the better. The main character is enthusiastically engaged in the transformation of her new home. In this, she is helped by all the servants and residents of the Anatol Castle. Thanks to her daily, effective work, Lady Calyps has almost gotten rid of her panic attacks and is transformed not only internally, but also externally. With each new day, the main character began to look more and more like the kind of housewife who could become a strong support for her husband and protect his rear in case of danger. Lady Calyps walks around her family estate with a financial report in hand to record everything. For a moment, the girl wonders if Riftan Calyps will like the results of her work when he returns from his business trip. The main character resolutely drove away all doubts and thought about the fact that she had not yet had time to visit the stables today to check everything there. A few minutes later, Lady Calyps came to the stable and met the groom there, who was very surprised by the lady's personal visit to such an unusual place for her. The groom greeted Lady Calyps respectfully and asked if she couldn't send a maid here so she wouldn't get dirty in horse manure. The main character smiled and replied that she wasn't afraid of getting dirty. Sometimes it can even be very useful for some people. After this, the girl looked around the stable and asked the groom what he needed to do his job properly. The servant did not lose his head and listed a long list of things he needed in the stable. The young duchess wrote everything down in her journal and said that she would order everything from the merchant soon. The groom was pleased with the lady's visit and thanked her for her care. After visiting the stables, the main character looked at her financial journal and felt a little dizzy from the abundance of lists and the number of different figures. It turns out that doing business is not so easy. Lady Calypso closed her journal and thought that she was doing well and that she would definitely cope with all the tasks. Besides, the girl realized that she had just not been trembling when meeting a groom whom she hardly knew. This was very good. The panic was gradually receding and losing its power over the young duchess. Suddenly, a strong and cool wind blew and brought the girl out of her thoughtful state. Lady Calyps was almost not scared this time either. The main character looked at her disheveled red hair, which had been tangled by a gust of wind. The girl thought that it wouldn't hurt to make her hairdo more practical. A new gust of wind made Lady Calyps think about her beloved husband. The girl wants to know what is happening to him now and how he got to the capital of the kingdom. Suddenly, the main character heard someone's voice nearby and asked her what she was doing here all alone. The girl became alarmed and looked around to see who had called her. Lady Calyps did not expect to meet anyone here. The main character saw two men walking towards her who said that there was no need to be afraid of them. One of the strangers nudged the other in the side and laughed loudly, saying that his friend had frightened the young duchess. Lady Calyps recognized the young men. They turned out to be the knights in training she had seen during the banquet in her honor. One of the young knights hastened to introduce himself to his mistress and said that his name was Urix Lobar. He was expecting his imminent knighthood and was very proud of it. The second young trainee also introduced himself to the young duchess and said that his name was Gauru Livakon. He too would soon be knighted. Urix Lobar asked the lady what she was doing there. The girl replied that she was inspecting her property. The young trainee said that Lady Calyps should not remain alone for long, even on the territory of Anatol's castle. It could be dangerous. So the young men offered their services to the lady as escorts. The main character listened carefully to the young men and said that she was fine, so she didn't need any escorts now. Urix Lobar was very upset when he heard his mistress's answer. She does not consider her interlocutors to be full-fledged knights who can protect her. Lady Calyps does not want to upset the young people. The mistress agreed to let the interns keep her company, but not for long. Looking at the young, cheerful interns, the main character remembered the stern and silent nights of her husband. The difference seemed striking to the girl. Lady Calyps realized that she could communicate much more easily with the young trainees. The girl felt at ease with these candidates for knighthood. The talkative Urix Lobar smiled at his mistress and said that the captain of the Royal Knights is the best role model for him and his friend. All the trainees love and respect Riftan Calyps very much. The young duchess listened attentively to the intern and asked if her husband really was such an outstanding knight. Urix Lobar replied to his mistress that her husband and the members of his company were not just outstanding knights. These great warriors were the stuff of legends throughout the 7 kingdoms. The cheerful intern added that he once saw Riftan Calyps perform at a knight's tournament, and since then he has dreamed of becoming a great warrior like the main character's husband. Lady Calyps listened attentively to her young interlocutor and thanked him for speaking so well of the captain of the Royal Knights. The young trainees, inspired by their mistress's words, continued to praise Riftan Calyps and his fighting qualities. The female protagonist also decided to praise her husband and said that the captain of the Royal Knights once killed a huge monster with one blow of his sword. These words made a great impression on the young men. Therefore, the girl added that in fact her husband killed not 1, but 10 monsters with one blow of his magic sword. The young and inexperienced trainees immediately believed their mistress's story and asked her to tell them all the details of this battle between the captain of the Royal Knights and the terrible monsters. The main character decided not to disappoint her husband's young fans, so she immediately came up with a gripping story about how Riftan Calyps defeated a squad of terrible monsters. The girl described in great detail how her husband grabbed his sword and chopped the bloodthirsty monsters into small pieces. The young interns listened to this story with great attention and pleasure. The young duchess was so carried away by her emotional story about her husband's exploits that she herself almost believed in the truth of this adventure story. The main character continues her story. In her imagination, passions have heated up to the absolute limit. This tension was transmitted to the young listeners of this fantastic story. Suddenly, Lady Calyps stopped her story at the most interesting place, because she saw the wizard Root, who was near a dried oak tree and performing some strange manipulations. The girl decided to take a closer look to understand what her mentor was actually doing now. His actions surprised the young duchess very much. Meanwhile, the young wizard took a knife and began scraping some particles from the trunk of the dead tree. Perhaps he was collecting samples of the material for future research. The young wizard collects the material in his knapsack and at the same time continues the fictitious story of Lady Calyps, showing her that he is not very pleased with her inventions. After that, the sorcerer Ruth looked at his mistress and with just one look made her understand that she shouldn't lie so openly even to young trainees. Perhaps the lady should restrain her flights of fancy, so as not to pay for it with disappointment later. The wizard collected the substances he needed and approached the young knight candidates. He ended his mistress's fantastic story on a pompous note, which was very much appreciated by the fans of the captain of the Royal Knights. Urix Lobar asked the wizard what he was doing there. The wizard showed the trainees his knapsack and said that he was creating special reagents at the request of Lady Calyps. Urix Lobar said that the young duchess told a very exciting story about how Riftan Calyps defeated several monsters with one blow of his magic blade. The young man wondered if the wizard Ruth was present at this event, and he was very surprised by this question. The main character heard these words and pressed her financial journal tightly to her stomach. The girl began to get very worried, and worried that she would now be exposed as a liar. Lady Calyps did not expect such a turn of events. The girl thought that no one would know that she had invented a fantastic story about the exploits of the captain of the Royal Knights. But the young wizard did not expose his mistress's lie. He looked carefully at Lady Calyps and turned to the young trainees. Wizard Ruth said that the wife of the captain of the Royal Knights forgot to tell them a magnificent story about the battle with a squad of werewolves. The main character's mentor decided to teach his ward a little lesson and told the young knight candidates that on the way to Anatol's castle, Riftan Calyps's squad met a squad of bloodthirsty werewolves in the forest. There were so many of these monsters that their skins could have covered all the corridors in the estate. Lady Calyps listens to the magician and understands that the sorcerer is now making fun of her. The girl felt very ashamed of her stupidity and lack of restraint, but it was too late to take back her words. The young wizard did not stop there. He said that Lady Calyps would be better able to tell all the details of this dizzying adventure because she was also present at this battle. The main character is in a stupor. She does not know what to say now. The sorcerer, Ruth, watches his mistress attentively. He is very interested to know how the young Duchess will get out of this unpleasant story for her, and whether she will draw any conclusions. After a few moments, the wizard realized that the girl was very upset, and this could lead to bad consequences. So the sorcerer decided to help his mistress and told the young trainees that this story would be too long and they should get down to their direct duties. The main character realized that she was saved. The girl quickly turned around and was about to leave before she said something else stupid. Suddenly, the sorcerer Ruth turned to his mistress and said that he had important news for the young Duchess. The main character heard her mentor's words and immediately stopped. The girl turned around and asked the sorcerer what news he had for the lady. The young wizard said nothing and handed Lady Calypso a document. He wanted the girl to read it immediately. The main character froze in indecision. She guessed that the sorcerer brought her a letter from Riftan Calypso. The girl's mentor said that the captain of the Royal Knights said that he would go home when the celebration of the victory in the 3-year war ended. Lady Calypso took the letter from the young wizard. He added that the feast would last 15 days. If the captain of the Royal Knights hurried, he could manage it in 10 days. The wizard thought for a moment and said that Riftan Calypso did not want to stay in the capital of the kingdom for even 1 extra minute. But this could harm his military career. Yurik Slobar intervened in the conversation and said that the chief of the Royal Knights wanted to return to Anatol's castle as soon as possible, because he was constantly threatened by squads of bloodthirsty werewolves and other monsters. Lady Calypso turned around again and thanked the young wizard for delivering her husband's letter. The girl said that she urgently needed to visit the forge on important business. In fact, the main character hurried to be alone in order to quickly read the letter that Riftan Calypso wrote to her. The next day, the young Duchess met the sorcerer Root again in the library. The girl did not expect to meet the young magician here today. She thought that their financial literacy classes had already come to an end. The wizard sits among books that are stacked on the library floor. He is studying some financial report and doing some calculations in his head. The young mage told the main character that she had ordered too many aromatic oils and cologne from the Merchant Guild representative. It would have been enough to order regular soap for knights who were not accustomed to such exquisite hygiene products. After that, Lady Calypso's mentor said that he wanted to add a few more useful things to the list that would definitely come in handy soon. The main character looks at the young wizard with bewilderment and doesn't know what to tell him. The sorcerer said that he wanted to order very expensive books that were vitally important to him, but Lady Calypso was against it. The girl said that the magician could not make such expensive orders at the expense of his commander, but the young wizard did not lose his head, and told his mistress that knowledge is the most valuable asset that can always be useful and will never spoil. It is very important to understand this. Wizard Ruth orders these books not only for himself. They will become valuable exhibits of the castle library. The main character listened carefully to her interlocutor and said that it could be a waste of money. The young Duchess finds it hard to understand that money is better spent on good books, not on aromatic oils and cologne. Lady Calypso did not lose her composure and pointed out to the young wizard the mess he constantly made in the library when he spent the night there, or just rested. Because of this, other visitors to this temple of knowledge do not feel comfortable and prefer not to come here. The sorcerer listened carefully to his mistress and said that he did not see any problem in this. He preferred to relax in the library because his tower was filled with various artifacts, books, and chemical reagents. The main character turned away from her mentor and sternly stated that, in any case, she could not order such expensive books even for general use in the library. This would negatively affect the budget of the Anatol estate. An emotional squabble began between the interlocutors. Each wants to prove that they are right and gives arguments in favor of their point of view. Lady Calypso told the wizard that the books he ordered were not written by sorcerers, but by ordinary people who study philosophy. They could not be useful to a magician. The girl's mentor asked her how she knew this. The main character answered her opponent that she had spent more than 22 years in her home library and had read a large number of books, educating herself. Lady Calypso was familiar with all the works of the authors that the wizard had added to the list. These words surprised the young wizard very much. He thought that the young Duchess was not interested in philosophical and scientific treatises. The main character thought for a while and said that a new road was planned for the next year. Therefore, she could not afford to buy expensive books, at least at the moment. Lady Calypso had said her last word and was about to leave the library. But the wizard Ruth said that he would not allow his mistress's future child to be an ordinary fool who could only swing his blade. The main character heard these words of her mentor and turned around. She was very surprised and even scared that the wizard mentioned her future child. The young wizard did not lose his composure and said that it was natural for a married couple to have children. One day they would appear, and the wizard Ruth did not want them to grow up as ordinary ignoramuses and fools. The main character listened carefully to her mentor and for a moment imagined her future child, who would look like Riftan Calyps. The girl's heart began to beat quickly from these thoughts. The wizard wasted no time. He picked up the list that Lady Calyps had thrown on the floor because she had not approved of it. After this, the sorcerer Ruth showed the document to his mistress and said that the knowledge that her children would receive by reading the books on this list would be the most important legacy that the Duchess would leave to her children. Meanwhile, some interesting things are happening in the kitchen. Young knight candidates have appeared here, wanting to learn how to use cold arms and cut flesh. The cook is horrified by the trainees' impudence. Urix Lobar took a knife and began to cut the fish clumsily, imagining himself as a knight who kills a monster with one blow. The chef said that the young man was doing everything wrong, but the inexperienced trainee is confident of his success. He tells the chef that he is doing well and that he can handle the task himself. The knight candidate smiled and added that he wanted to practice how to properly cut the flesh of various creatures. This would definitely come in handy when he was knighted. The cook's assistants watch the inexperienced young man closely and say that he cuts up an ordinary fish as if it were some kind of wild monster. This is simply a terrible sight, not for the faint of heart. After some time, the main character came to the kitchen for another check and saw what the young knight candidates, to whom she had recently told a fantastic story about the exploits of her husband, were doing there. The chef noticed that the lady did not like what was happening in the kitchen. He tried to stop the trainee, but Urix Lobar was still under his illusions. He said that the young duchess should like the way he dealt with the fish. She was not afraid of the sight of blood because she was the wife of the great captain of the Royal Knights. The intern turned to seek support for his words from his mistress. The girl pretended not to be at all embarrassed by what Urix Lobar was doing now. The main character closed her eyes so as not to see how the young knight candidate continued to cut up the fish. After a few minutes, Urix Lobar has finished his work and the fish has been cut into many small pieces. The servants watch the young man and wait for what will happen next, but the chef was not at a loss. He gently pushed the young candidate for the royal knighthood aside and said that he could leave the fish to the specialist to prepare the beautifully cut fish. The cheerful trainee, Urix Lobar, turned to the young lady and said that he had caught this fish this morning especially for the young duchess. His catch would make a very tasty dish. And while it was being prepared by the chef, the young man wanted to know the continuation of the story about the meeting with werewolves in the forest. The main character listened attentively to the young intern and smiled. She really likes this energetic young man who respects her husband very much. Urix Lobar is not going to calm down. He took another big fish that he caught this morning and said that he is ready to catch such a fish for the lady every day if she will tell him stories about the exploits of the captain of the Royal Knights. Lady Calyps is in a great mood. She is very glad that there are such lively and joyful people around her, who are never sad and also have clear goals in life. But the girl does not know whether she should again come up with a fantastic story about the exploits of her husband. The young interns sat down at the table next to their mistress. They froze in anticipation of a new exciting story that the young duchess would now tell them. The girl looks at the young interns and understands that they are watching her like little cute puppies who obey their mother in everything until they grow up. A few moments later, the main character began her story. The young candidates for the Royal Knights listened to their mistress with bated breath and absorbing her every word. Lady Calypso confidently tells her fictitious story about her husband's exploits and thinks that she is very pleased to be in the company of such kind and sympathetic people. This is the feeling that the young interns have when they listen to their mistress's entertaining and inspiring story. Now everyone is happy with the current situation. A few minutes later, the chef announced that the fish was ready and they could begin dinner. The main character interrupted her story to look at the dish that the chef placed on the table. The castle's chef, Anatol, has surpassed himself in the culinary arts. That's what Lady Calyps thought when she saw the magnificent fish dish that appeared on the table before her. It's simply a masterpiece. The girl wants to try this dish immediately to appreciate not only its appearance, but also its taste. Judging by the gorgeous aroma, this culinary masterpiece will appeal to the main character. The young duchess did not hesitate and cut off a small, juicy piece of fish that the young candidates for the royal knights had given her today. After that, the girl put the fish in her mouth and began to chew it slowly in order to fully experience the taste of this beautiful-looking dish. A moment later, the main character realized that she had never tasted anything like this in her life. This culinary masterpiece tasted even better than it looked. The young trainees were very pleased that the fish they had caught this morning, especially for their mistress, had been to her taste. They said that they would catch more of the same fish and bring it to Lady Calypso. The main character listened to the knight candidates and said that she would look forward to this gift from them. Several days passed. Finally, the day came when the renovation of Anatol's estate was successfully completed. The main character entered the hall of her castle to see the final result of her many days of tireless work. She could not believe her eyes when she saw the once gloomy castle transformed beyond recognition. Lady Calypso realized that she had done a great job. Now her family estate is a wonderful place to live and relax. The main character walks through the hall of her estate and thinks that at the very beginning she doubted her abilities and did not know whether she would be able to cope with this difficult task. But Lady Calypso passed this life test with flying colors. The young duchess looks out the window and thinks that she should send a written thank you to the representative of the Merchant Guild for the help he provided. But the successful renovation of Anatol's castle is the merit of many people, and the main character understands this perfectly well at the moment. She internally thanks everyone who helped her as much as she could. Suddenly, Lady Calypso noticed that there was a young wizard next to her who was watching her closely and also admiring the renovated castle of Anatol. He was very pleased with the result. The sorcerer Ruth decided to joke about his mistress and said that he did not know whether Riftan Calypso would like this repair. For this stupid joke, the magician received an angry rebuke from the young duchess. But the young wizard chose to remain a cynic to the end. He said that everything here was too expensive and rich. The glitter of the gilding constantly made the wizard's eyes water. The main character looks closely at her skeptical mentor and does not understand whether he is joking now or speaking to her quite seriously. In any case, Lady Calypso is very grateful to the wizard Ruth for his help and mentoring, as well as for the financial literacy lessons, without which the girl would not have achieved success in her endeavors. A few moments later, the magician switched to a serious tone and told his mistress that he had finished preparing a magical reagent to revive the withered oak tree that towered in the middle of the abandoned greenhouse. The main character listened attentively to her interlocutor and was very happy with this news. The girl wants to start reviving the majestic tree immediately. A few minutes later, Lady Calypso, accompanied by a whole squad of maids and a young wizard, came to the dried-up oak tree to bring it back to life. The sorcerer Ruth came close to the dead tree and began to stroke it with his hand, uttering some powerful magic spell. The Duchess's mentor is focused and silent at such a crucial moment. The main character watches the young wizard closely. The girl does not understand what exactly the magician is doing now, but she realizes that this is now necessary to revive the withered tree. The sorcerer finished casting the spell and turned to his mistress. After that, the young wizard said that he was ready to begin the process of reviving the oak. A moment later, the magician took out a bottle with a magical green reviving reagent and poured its contents onto the dried-up tree. The magical liquid was immediately absorbed into the trunk and roots of the dried-up oak. After this, the wizard Ruth raised his hands and asked the great god of the earth to restore life to the dead tree, which is sung about in ancient legends. The cunning magician deliberately performs this ritual as loudly and theatrically as possible in order to instill in the attending maids a feeling of admiration for their masters. They must know that their mistress is capable of not only making a wonderful repair to the castle, but also reviving a long-dead tree. There was silence for a few seconds. Suddenly, the majestic oak tree was enveloped in a magical glow from root to top. The gods had heard the young wizard's prayer. But whether the withered tree would come back to life would only be known next spring.